Chapter 45. Ma. Troublesome, could she not keep pressing against his waist bones in the same position? It really made people feel uncomfortable. Duan Yu turned his head, his peach blossom eyes brimming with moisture. He really did look a bit pitiful and pitiful. Unfortunately, the one facing him was little classmate Arbor. This little fellow didn't feel anything at all. Even if the other party's eyes kept shooting electricity at her as if they could talk, it was still useless. In her eyes, it was all the same whether one was good-looking or not. She stood up and tugged at the rope on the youth's hand. She pulled him up as well and walked 2 steps forward with a tug on the rope. Duan Yu was frantic on the inside. His hands were tied to the wood, so he reluctantly walked 2 steps and tugged at the rope behind him. Hey, little miss, can't we negotiate? Arbor's eyes flashed with anger, and she abruptly raised the ferrule in her hand. Want to resist? Don't. Duan Yu hurriedly blocked with his hands. His eyes hid behind his hands as he looked pitifully at the little girl. Don't hit. Let's talk nicely. Arbor tugged at the rope on his wrists. It looked like an ordinary brownish-yellow hemp rope, but it could bind his hands so that he couldn't break free no matter what. It could be seen that this wasn't an ordinary hemp rope. This is a mystic weapon. Arbor cast him a sidelong glance. Duan Yu's eyes flickered. He wondered who this little girl was. She was clearly a village girl, so how could she have heard of mystic weapons? Bam! Duan Yu fell forward and almost fell face first. It wasn't until he was sprawled on the ground that he realized he was kicked to the ground by that savage little girl. Can't you freaking have a bit of patience? It wasn't that he didn't want to answer, but he needed to organize his words. Ow. Duan Yu wanted to cry. He considered himself an arrogant and domineering person, but he didn't expect to meet an even more arrogant person today. A load of nonsense. Find. Duan Yu. Mother, when did he speak nonsense? He hadn't spoken more than 5 sentences from beginning to end. Find? What? Duan Yu had just expressed a, "I don't understand your words," expression when he was greeted with a round of punches. The little girl really didn't hold back. Her fist was aimed at his handsome face, which was enraged by the heavens. Duan Yu was so angry that he almost couldn't catch his breath and fainted. Stop. Ouch. Damn, are all kids these days so unreasonable? When Duan Yu's gaze met the child's, he was taken aback by the bone-chilling chill in her eyes. He immediately jumped up and walked forward with a grumble. He didn't know where this child came from, but his entire body was filled with violent genes. If there was a disagreement, he would go berserk on the spot and attack his handsome face. How terrifying. Cough, you know where this is. Duan Yu felt that if he continued to play the fool, the child might really beat him until he became an idiot. The child glared at him with a, "You're talking nonsense" look. He waved his little paw and didn't even bother to say anything. Let me tell you, it's not good for you to feel like you've said a lot before you even finish half a sentence, and you're too lazy to continue. You have to treat it properly. You have to know, people can only express each other's intentions through constant contact and communication. Don't. I'll find. Don't hit me again. Cough, there are about 5 entrances to this mystic realm. Each entrance opens in a different way and at a different time. Duan Yu paused and specially turned back to look at the child. However, he saw that she was expressionless. There was no surprise or emotion in her eyes. It was as calm as a pool of stagnant water, as if she already knew about this. Chapter 46. Arbor pointed at the pile of rocks in front of her, her slender brows raised. Her meaning couldn't be any more obvious. Stop blabbering and get to work. Duan Yu inwardly rolled his eyes. Not only did this little lass viciously order people around, but she also didn't allow them to talk too much. Where did this bad habit come from? Duan Yu sighed inwardly. I have a map in my inner world, but my hands are tied behind my back right now, so I can't look at it at all. The child glanced at his hands that were tied to the dead wood and took a step forward. Duan Yu inexplicably took a step back because he felt that the savage child definitely wouldn't be so kind as to untie him. Sure enough, this ferocious fellow actually flipped him over and forcibly twisted his arms, causing his bound hands to flip to the front. Fuck. It really freaking hurt. Duan Yu wanted to burst into tears and curse even more. However, in the next second, his forehead was hit by that dead wood that was erected in front of his eyes. Woo-woo. He felt that his life was so bitter. With a hopeless expression, Duan Yu resigned himself to his fate and took out a crumpled parchment map from his chest pocket. But that eyesore of a piece of wood. It kept swaying in front of his eyes, so he angrily turned to glare at her. Can you help me chop this eyesore of a piece of wood? How can I look at the map like this? Arbor glanced at his hand, but she didn't have any intention of snatching it over to take a look. She merely raised her eyelids slightly before quickly withdrawing her gaze and pinching it in passing. Crack! A section of the wood was cut short, and the remaining half was tied to his hand. However, it didn't obstruct his view of the map anymore. Duan Yu felt more and more hopeless. He felt that he couldn't communicate with this fellow at all. However, Arbor ignored him and continued to ponder her own matters. Although she didn't know why it was like this, it was very clear that the mystic paradise that didn't appear until 3 years later in her previous life had already been discovered by someone one step ahead of time. However, Arbor frowned slightly and speculated in her mind, perhaps a similar incident happened when she was 7 years old in her previous life, and someone had already come to the village to investigate the entrance to the mystic paradise. It was just that she was still muddle-headed at the time and didn't know anything. Since the young man had a map in his hands, it was natural that he had sent someone to investigate before. Arbor found that the rope was quite useful. She could hold the boy in her hand and prevent him from escaping midway and leaving her in this corner. Arbor was in a good mood, but the boy was extremely unhappy. He always felt that this little guy was holding his hand like a large dog. Ever since he encountered that old hag from the Coitus faction on the way, Duan Yu felt that his days had been extremely unpleasant. When he stopped, Arbor naturally stopped as well and used his eyes to hint at Duan Yu. Here. Duan Yu felt aggrieved, and his anger was stifled in his chest. Did this imbecile have to be so lazy? Where did she learn this bad habit? Did she think that he would instantly understand her meaning just by hinting with her eyes? It's here. Duan Yu took a deep breath. Oh. Duan Yu had already completely accepted his fate. He stuffed the map back into his lapel, but in reality, he had thrown it back into his inner world. A black bead the size of a pigeon's egg appeared in his hands. Arbor recognized it at a glance. This bead had previously caused half of Hulun Mountain to tremble. She quickly tightened her grip on the rope with an expression that said, "If you dare to mess around, I'll kill you right now." Duan Yu twitched his mouth and grumpily said, "The passageway entrance is just below. I'll blow it up right now. Don't worry, with me here, the core ravaging thunder won't harm us in the slightest." Chapter 47. The core ravaging thunder was thrown down, and it exploded not far from their feet. The terrifying power did not spread to their bodies, as Duan Yu controlled it to a small area. After the pervading smoke dissipated, Arbor held the rope around Duan Yu's wrists and peered through a small head to take a look. The pile of rocks had been blasted into several puddles of stone powder by the core ravaging thunder's power. There was a pitch-black hole that was bottomless. "Let's go," Duan Yu urged from behind. "This entrance can move, and it will automatically seal itself when the time is up." Arbor turned to look at him meaningfully. This guy was very capable. He could directly tear open one of the entrances to the mystic realm with the power of a concealed weapon. Only this entrance can be torn open with force. The other entrances can't be torn open so easily. Duan Yu noticed Arbor's expression and explained. Arbor retracted her gaze and walked towards him. She shook the rope in her hand. Go down and scout the way first. Duan Yu secretly ground his teeth. Who knew where she inherited her sinister and vicious personality from at such a young age? Duan Yu resigned himself to fate and took a step forward. Suddenly, a glint flitted through his eyes, and he abruptly jumped down without warning. Arbor revealed an icy smile. She released the rope and allowed him to freely fall. She even took a step forward and reached out to suck several large round rocks to her feet. Then, she kicked them down one by one with her toes. Ow! Duan Yu's desolate cry came from the deep pit. That brat suddenly felt as if he had dug a hole and buried himself in it. He originally wanted to suddenly jump down and pull that child down in passing to scare her so that he could completely grasp the initiative for the rest of the journey. Presumably, that child was still a little old and simply couldn't make a judgment and reaction in this kind of sudden situation. However, the child actually didn't hesitate to. Let go. Go. Arbor cast a sidelong glance at the pitch-black hole, and her lips curled up as she softly said, "Idiot." Then, he walked to the edge of the pit and slowly looked down. A straight and steep stone staircase was built along the side of the hole, completely hidden in the darkness. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to see that there was such a staircase carved into the wall of the hole. Arbor slowly walked down the straight and steep stairs, counting the steps in his heart. When she counted to 100, a faint green halo slowly entered her eyes. The sound of flowing water drifted into her ears. It seemed that this was the end. When her feet touched the ground, she felt a warm and moist water flow into the soles of her shoes. The underground water has already flowed here. Arbor frowned slightly and walked a few steps forward. Then, he saw Duan Yu sprawled on the ground, his face devoid of any meaning as he quietly gazed at him. Arbor pulled out the ferrule from his conscience with a wave of his hand. He walked to Duan Yu's side and raised his right palm. Duan Yu's pupils contracted as he shouted, "Wait! My left arm's shoulder bone is already broken. I can't attack you in the short term. If you let me stay, I can guide you on how to refine the existing energy in the mystic realm for your own use." Arbor raised a brow and withdrew the ferrule, agreeing to his suggestion. However, her following actions were filled with savagery, without the slightest hint of friendliness. Chapter 48. When this youth leaped earlier, he had made up his mind to harm her. If she hadn't acted according to the situation and let go, she might have already been tricked by the youth. Even an adult wouldn't be able to withstand the gravitational drag at that speed, let alone a petite person like her. If her feet didn't touch the ground, she would be dangling in midair, and her entire body would be carried by that idiotic youth. What a joke! How could Arbor allow this kind of situation to happen? Behave yourself. Arbor gave the youth a fierce look, telling him to figure it out himself. She then reached out to grab the rope around Duan Yu's hand and dragged him forward. Below their feet was a small, gurgling stream. The water wasn't wide, but it meandered for a long distance. Not long after Arbor walked with Duan Yu, the scene before them started to brighten. Due to Duan Yu being hit by several boulders in succession when he fell, his entire body was covered in fine wounds except for his left shoulder bone, which was slightly fractured and couldn't be lifted. It could be seen how ruthless this little girl was back then. She didn't give him any face at all. Duan Yu had just opened his mouth to speak when he felt stars before his eyes. His mouth and tongue were so dry that he almost fainted. Arbor didn't notice his abnormality. At this moment, her eyes were almost completely fixed on the beautiful scenery before her. In her previous life, when she entered the paradise, this place had almost been completely reclaimed and excavated. Everything that should be looted was taken, and the entire mystic realm was nearly destroyed by those people. How could she see such a peaceful and beautiful scene now? The land of paradise looked like a secluded valley. The valley was surrounded by magnetite mines. The mountains rose and fell continuously, and the magnetite inside was innumerable. What entered her eyes was a small peach blossom forest. Beside the forest was a small, lush green lake with a relatively calm water surface. When they walked through the passageway, the stream beneath their feet also diverged from this small lake. The lake water looked rather clear and calm. Separated by the emerald lake surface, the nimble little fish swimming below could be seen clearly. This place was filled with a dense mystic energy aura. With such abundant profound energy, wanting to absorb it all within a few days was a fool's dream. Arbor frowned. She couldn't stay here for too long. If they didn't go home by nightfall, their mother, Wei Ziqin, would be worried to death. Therefore Arbor shifted his gaze to the young man with his head tilted. He grabbed his wrist and pulled it hard. How do I refine it? Unexpectedly, as soon as she finished speaking, the young man fell to the ground with a bang. Xiao Mu finally realized that something was wrong with the youth. She frowned and kicked him lightly. What are you doing? Don't play dead, get up. He was such a weakling. How could he be so weak after being hit by a few stones? The young man tried his best to open his mouth. He really wanted to tell this guy that he hadn't eaten or drunk anything for a few days. Now, his hunger and thirst had completely broken out. He needed water and food to replenish his strength. The young man struggled to move his finger and wrote the word, water, on the green pine soil. Arbor frowned and looked down at him. Do you want to drink water? Men were so troublesome. Arbor pulled up the weak young man and directly dragged him to the side of the lake. Drink. Chapter 49. What? The youth's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. 10,000 giant beasts were roaring in his mind. Damn girl actually made him drink this kind of dirty lake water. Was this kind of thing for him to drink? It was so dirty. If it wasn't specially treated, wouldn't he have diarrhea after drinking it? How could that do? How honorable was his status? He had to drink filtered water at the very least. Give me, water. Duan Yu weakly spat out these words. Seeing that his arm was broken and he was already in such a miserable state, shouldn't the child be benevolent and extend a benevolent and friendly hand to support him? Reality proved that the child had long fed something like kindness to the dogs. Hearing Duan Yu's words, the child instantly snorted, and impatience and viciousness surged out of her eyes. She directly reached out to grab Duan Yu's long hair and heavily pushed his head down, burying his entire upper body in the lake water. Gurgle gurgle gurgle. The miserable youth was caught off guard and was forced to drink a large mouthful of water. He instantly felt that the entire world was filled with eerie malice towards him. Ah! Cough cough cough. The youth struggled but was pressed down by the child, so he gulped down another mouthful of water. Ugh cough cough cough. When Duan Yu's head could finally float to the surface, his upper body was drenched by the lake water. You! His handsome face was flushed red, and this was the first time he felt angry. Who the hell knew how many dirty floating things he had just swallowed? Who the hell knew if these things would overturn his stomach and cause him to be in so much pain that he wished he was dead? Arbor indifferently glanced at him, unable to conceal the disdain in his eyes. You! Are the people from your village all so careless? Do you know that I've never drunk this kind of dirty lake water since I was young? You! He was simply infuriated to death. Arbor finally understood why this guy was suffering from dehydration. So it turned out that he had never drunk any water because he despised other people's drinking utensils for being dirty. Arbor sneered, unable to conceal the mockery and indifference in his eyes. Despise it for being dirty? That's because a pampered young master like you has never experienced a real shortage of food and water. When you're at the last moment of your life, even if it's a piece of dried tree bark in front of you, or a bit of dirty water, you'll still eat and drink it. How can you be so unreasonable, kid? For survival. Arbor interrupted the boy's words. Looking at the boy's slightly stunned eyes, he said coldly, when the only thing left in your mind is to survive, you don't care about anything else. Clean. Dirty? Arbor smirked. Soon, you won't be able to be picky. In the later stages of the zombie disaster in her previous life, the entire water source was destroyed, and it was difficult to find a clean water source on Seacombe Planet. No one could withstand this impending disaster. Pick. Arbor sneered. Before picking, one had to have the strength and life to pick. If the water at the bottom of such a clear lake was dirty, then what about those people who could even drink muddy water in the later stages? Duan Yu stared at the child in a daze. He felt that when the child said these words to him, the iciness hidden in the depths of her eyes was so sharp that it could freeze everything. She seemed to be looking at him, but it also seemed like she was looking at the near future through his face. Her indifferent eyes contained a trace of indifference and numbness. Duan Yu took a deep breath and suppressed the anger that was about to erupt in his heart. Just as he was about to speak, an arrow carrying a gust of wind pierced through the air and shot to his feet. Chapter 50. Ha ha ha. Goosebump-inducing laughter once again reverberated through this valley. A woman in a gorgeous peach-pink dress slowly appeared in front of them with a grin while waving the sandalwood fan in her hand. Following behind her were 20 to 30 people of all ages, both men and women. Brother Duan, thankfully you were leading the way, so we were able to find the mystic realm so effortlessly. Your Duan clan is truly worthy of being a hidden weapon scout patrician family that has been passed down for generations. Your grasp of information is truly accurate, ha ha ha. The woman blew a kiss in Duan Yu's direction and winked cutely with a smile. Arbor's small face stiffened slightly, and she resisted the urge to vomit as she turned to look at Duan Yu, who had an unsightly expression. You were the only one dilly-dallying over there. Now that they've caught up, hurry and take out that whatever thunder and give them one. The little girl nodded at Duan Yu with her chin and used her threatening gaze to tell him to hurry up and do as she says. Duan Yu cried uncontrollably on the inside, Sister. Do you think that core-ravaging thunder is a cabbage that can be found on the street and can be found as many as you want? It was very difficult to manufacture this kind of hidden weapon with great lethality. He only had 2 on him, and he had already used them all up, so where would he get more? Xiao Mu stared sharply at him, incessantly hinting at him with a ruthless gaze. The latter instantly understood in a flash, and he pretended to reach into his bosom to fumble around. But the core-ravaging thunder's power is enormous. If I throw it here, it might cause the entire secret realm to collapse, right? At that time, it won't benefit either of us. Ha ha ha. Arbor suddenly chuckled. Duan Yu's fumbling motion froze as he stared dumbly at the little girl. He felt like he had never seen a second expression on her face other than apathy and indifference ever since he started interacting with her. But now, the little girl was actually smiling. However, this smile was worse than not smiling. Her smile was so fake. She only let out a small chuckle, and her expression remained stoic without any change. Have you ever seen such an uncoordinated and unsynchronized smile? Give it to me. Duan Yu glared fiercely and reflexively took out something and handed it to Arbor. Arbor took it with his small hand and held it in his palm. He pretended to raise his right hand high and was about to throw it down. The crowd of Coitus sect disciples who were watching from the front almost had a heart attack. The woman screamed, Stop, 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 stop. Little girl, let's talk it over, let's talk it over. Arbor expressionlessly turned to the people from Acacia sect. What's your name? The woman was dumbfounded. She felt that there was something wrong with this commanding tone, but she didn't know if there was something wrong with her reflexes, but she actually replied reflexively, Ha, Yao Ji, my name is Yao Ji. It's the left protector of the Coitus faction. Little girl, let's talk things over slowly, isn't that right? What a joke. With the power of the core-ravaging thunder, a single one of them could really destroy this secret realm. At that time, no one would be able to escape unscathed. What was the point of that? The Coitus sect was here to seek wealth. How could they just watch as so many magnetite mines in this mystic realm were about to be destroyed? How could one enter a treasure mountain and return empty-handed? Just thinking about it made one's heart ache. If this treasure ground was destroyed like this. Retreat. Arbor clenched his right hand. The people from Coitus sect subconsciously took 2 steps back. Suddenly, someone screamed from the crowd, "Io, there's something." Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It was as if several bolts of lightning flashed before everyone's eyes. The people who were attacked all fell to the ground in pain and clutched their wounds. Their complexions instantly darkened. Chapter 51. Arbor raised her eyebrows. From her angle, she just happened to see 4 of Coitus sect's disciples fall down in an instant. The unlucky person closest to her line of sight had not even been on the ground for a minute before his entire body turned into a dark green color. His eyes bulged and a dark green liquid flowed from the corner of his mouth. His head was tilted to one side and he was no longer breathing. It was obvious that he had been killed by a fatal poison in an instant. What a strong poison. It didn't even give people a chance to take the medicine and caused them to die on the spot. What's that? Yao Ji turned her head with a chill running down her spine. She caught a glimpse of a white light flitting past the corner of her eye. She immediately flung out the sandalwood fan in her hand without hesitation. A strand of mystic energy was attached to the fan and it suddenly collided with the white light. Chirp! The white light that was hit fell to the ground and the halo that surrounded it suddenly dispersed, revealing a palm-sized white furry squirrel. The little guy cleverly glanced at Yao Ji who was glaring angrily at it, then turned around and scampered away. Arbor couldn't help but snicker in her heart. When this little white mouse appeared, it was flashy and savage, biting 3 or 4 people to death in a matter of minutes. I didn't expect it to be such a coward, turning around and running away when it saw the situation wasn't right. It's just that the direction it ran in without a head or tail. Yao Ji gnashed her teeth. She grabbed the sandalwood fan that had flown back into her hand and chased after the white squirrel with 2 leaps. She once again attached mystic energy to the sandalwood fan in her hand and attacked the little white mouse's head with lightning speed. Arbor took a deep breath and suddenly raised the black ferrule that slid out of her sleeve, blocking Yao Ji's attack head-on at an extremely fast speed. The moment the 2 forces collided, the black ferrule in Arbor's hand emitted a strong black halo and blocked Yao Ji's attack with a bang. Arbor's small hand that was tightly holding the ferrule was covered with tiny beads of sweat. She lowered her head to look at Inky in her hand and happily stroked it. Inky seemed to feel the little girl's joyous mood and a layer of black mist floated on its surface. If it wasn't for Momo's strength, she would have definitely been sent flying by Yao Ji's charge. The moment the 2 of them came into contact, Arbor could clearly feel that the cultivation of the woman in front of her was not just a little bit higher than hers. Momo had blocked 80% of the power for her, and she had blocked the remaining 20%. However, her hand that was holding onto Momo still felt a faint pain. It was clear how strong that woman was. Arbor could feel the strength of the enemy. His heart was filled with fighting spirit, and his eyes shone brightly. Yao Ji's eyes widened in an instant as she stared at the little girl in front of her in shock. How could that be? Ah! She was well aware of her strength. She was a genuine peak level 7 mystic cultivator. With her cultivation, she could see through her opponent's cultivation with a glance. She was merely a level 3 mystic cultivator. He had not even reached rank 3 lower tier, but why? A level 3 mystic cultivator could actually block an all-out attack from a peak level 7 mystic cultivator. What kind of joke was this? Who would believe such a thing? Chirp! The little white mouse's eyes that were the size of croton beans revealed a human-like glint of tears. It stretched out its 2 short forelimbs and bounced toward Arbor with an expression of a savior asking for a hug. Arbor was momentarily speechless. The little white mouse reacted extremely quickly and swiftly climbed up Arbor's white skirt. After it reached Arbor's back, it buried its head in Arbor's hair and rubbed back and forth. Chirp chirp. The little white mouse grabbed a strand of Arbor's long hair and swayed its fluffy tail with an inexplicable expression of intoxication. Chapter 52. Duan Yu, who was watching coldly from the sidelines, sneered. He dared to bet his 12 years of life that the little girl's motive for attacking definitely wasn't to save such an unimportant and adorable white mouse. In reality, because the little white mouse was fleeing in the direction of Arbor and Yao Ji's mystic energy was rushing toward her, Arbor didn't have time to consider too much. She could only meet the attack head-on in order to block it without suffering any injuries. She was merely saving the little white mouse in passing. At this time, Arbor's face was stoic as she pulled the little white squirrel from her back to her eyes in disdain and casually tossed it aside. With a whoosh, the pitiful little mouse was immediately tossed away by a certain child, and it was carried away by the wind. Duan Yu's mouth twitched. He really didn't want to ridicule this savage child. Shouldn't a normal little girl be very happy to see such a furry and adorable creature? It was obvious that this black-hearted person wearing the skin of a little girl in front of him wasn't a little girl at all. Chirp, squeak, squeak. The little white mouse's bean-sized eyes were brimming with pitiful tears as it quickly hopped back. It followed the hem of Arbor's clothes and used its two short front paws to grab onto a corner of her clothes. Arbor looked down and saw that clever little white mouse using its small, black eyes to look at her like a human. It swung around while tugging on the corner of her clothes before jumping onto her waist and slipping back onto her shoulder with a swish. Arbor was baffled. Where did this lively little white mouse pop out from? From her knowledge in her previous life, there were generally two types of mystic realms. One type was a mystic realm of inheritance set up by an otherworldly expert, a grotto heaven or an immortal's abode. These types had ferocious beasts placed inside to guard the mystic realm and test visitors. The other type was the one in front of her. It was naturally nurtured by heaven and earth and formed naturally after hundreds of years of spiritual energy. Before an outsider opened the mystic realm, this was a small world that was completely isolated from the outside world. There were mostly ores and spirit wood, and living creatures were rare. Unless it was a mystic realm that formed after thousands or tens of thousands of years and formed its own natural laws, it could form a complete living world. At least, she had never heard of a poisonous squirrel appearing in this mystic realm in her previous life. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The little white mouse jumped excitedly on her shoulder. It blinked its small black eyes and a fawning expression appeared on its furry little face. Xiao Mu's small hand grabbed the white mouse again. Just as she was about to fling it thousands of miles away so that it would not be able to get close again, mystic energy that suddenly condensed from all directions froze her in place. The dense profound energy congealed into a substantial cloud, completely pressing down on her body. What's more, the profound energy in the entire mystic realm from all directions was unceasingly gathering in her direction. This strange movement was quickly detected by Yao Ji and the others. Each and every one of them widened their eyes in fright as they looked left and right, watching as the flowing profound energy passed by them and went straight to the little girl's side without any reluctance. How could this be? Yao Ji was so shocked that her eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. What was this stinky girl doing all of a sudden? Until a nearby coitus sect disciple asked in a trembling voice, "Little girl, are you refining all the profound energy in the mystic realm? How is that possible?" Yao Ji immediately let out a screech like a turkey. Her eyes stared straight at Arbor. What kind of joke is this? She's still so young, forcefully refining all the profound energy in this mystic realm won't give her any benefits. She'll only explode. Chapter 53. While Arbor was in a daze, she immediately calmed herself down and sat cross-legged. With a grave expression, she slowly guided the profound energy that was surging from all directions into her profound veins. When the surging profound energy drilled into her body, Arbor suddenly felt like she couldn't breathe. She was very clear that her profound veins were currently very weak and couldn't absorb too much profound energy. What was called biting off more than one could chew? Being greedy might not necessarily have a good ending and might even backfire. Therefore, not to mention how piercing the envious, jealous, and hateful gazes of Yao Ji and company were, Arbor didn't want to inexplicably absorb the profound energy from all directions at this time. The little fellow's face was heavy and solemn. She took a deep breath and tried her best to calm down. She couldn't be nervous. The more anxious the situation was, the calmer her heart was, and she couldn't lose her composure. She was suddenly stunned. Although her small face was paralyzed and the people around her couldn't see any clues, her heart was already in a perilous situation. What was going on? Her vision, that was originally focused on inspecting the weak profound veins in her body, was now stuck in her dantian. Only a level 10 mystic cultivator or above could see the dantian, but now, who could explain to her why her dantian looked so different from her previous life? In her previous life, when she reached level 10 mystic cultivation, she had once seen her dantian. It was a ball of white fluid. She could clearly see that the milky white fluid flowed to the profound veins in her body and circulated in her body before finally returning to her dantian. Cultivation in a normal sense was firstly to strive to condense a mystic consciousness avatar to strengthen the mystic consciousness. Secondly, it was to repeatedly guide the profound energy to circulate around the body and strengthen the body's profound veins over and over again in a dull and tedious manner. If one didn't have a fortuitous encounter or a pill to expand the profound veins, normal mystic cultivators would continue to cultivate their profound veins and increase their profound energy. This was called bitter cultivation. Since the heavens had already given you profound veins that were different from normal people's, it naturally wouldn't allow you to easily reach the heavens in one step. Cultivation was raised bit by bit through daily practice. Her normal profound veins in her previous life actually mutated in this life. Now, no one could tell her why her dantian felt like it was pitch black when she looked at it. It was as if there were stars twinkling in it. At first glance, it didn't look like a dantian at all. Instead, it looked like an inexplicable starry night. What was even stranger was that Arbor stared at his dantian in a daze. There seemed to be a thin and weak little tree growing inside. It looked weak and could fart at any time. But whose dantian could grow trees? What was the meaning of such a strange thing? Arbor felt that her little brain wasn't enough. She felt like she was about to explode on the spot. Was it okay for this tree to grow in her dantian? No wonder her profound veins were so much weaker compared to her previous life. Could it be that all the profound energy in her body had been absorbed as nutrients for this tree? Xiao Mu suppressed the urge to go berserk and took a deep breath to calm herself down. However, she didn't know that while she was able to calm down when she closed her eyes to study her dantian, the people from the coitus sect around her couldn't remain calm. Duan Yu also widened his eyes and stared fixedly at Arbor as if he was looking at a monster. In less than 5 minutes, Xiao Mu's petite figure had already been enveloped by large lumps of dense mystic energy, and her tiny figure could no longer be seen clearly. A certain disciple from the coitus sect was unwilling to give up and wanted to break through the profound energy barrier to stop Arbor from absorbing the profound energy. However, he was flung away by the eruption of profound energy when he reached the large masses of profound energy. He couldn't even get close to Arbor, let alone get close to her. Chapter 54. That dantian, which resembled a galaxy, was currently endlessly absorbing the rich mystic energy that poured into it like a tide. Arbor could even see that unreliable sapling stretching out its thin branches in great comfort. How infuriating! The mystic energy that she painstakingly cultivated was all absorbed by that sickly tree. It ate meat in big mouthfuls and didn't even leave her a mouthful of soup. Where was the justice in this? Arbor was overwhelmed with grief and indignation. She simply forgot that the mystic energy that was pouring in from all directions wasn't the result of her painstaking cultivation. It was simply a freebie. Moreover, there was no data that indicated that the mystic energy that she painstakingly cultivated day and night was all absorbed by the sapling. The sapling expressed that it wouldn't take the blame for this. Duan Yu opened his mouth, and his gaze met the old hag from the Coitus sect before shifting away. Sitting down openly at this time and crazily absorbing the profound energy here in front of everyone from Coitus sect, only this savage girl would be able to do such a deranged thing. Duan Yu was completely unaware of Arbor's suffering. Arbor was still feeling bitter inside. She was forced to absorb the mystic energy purely to nourish the sapling. Who could she find to reason with? Yao Ji and the others were the most infuriated. They originally wanted Fang to take the mystic energy here for her own use, but now no matter how little mosquito meat there was, there should at least be some. Yao Ji promptly sat down cross-legged, looking like she was about to enter a cultivation state immediately. The Coitus sect disciples looked at each other before glaring covetously at Duan Yu across from them. 15 minutes later, Yao Ji angrily flung her sleeves and stood up because she discovered that she was purely wasting time. She sat there for half a day, yet she didn't even absorb a drop of mystic energy. This was simply inconceivable. She originally thought that the damn girl would explode and die in a few minutes, but in reality, it didn't happen. After such a long time, the little girl still sat there perfectly fine and continued to absorb mystic energy. Yao Ji's eyes were filled with fury, and she threw a glance at her subordinates. Several Coitus sect disciples braced themselves and rushed toward Arbor's figure that was enveloped in mystic energy. Their sabers flashed as they shouted angrily. Then after those few unlucky bastards were blasted out by the dense profound energy, there was no more after that. He simply couldn't injure the wretched lass who was wrapped in layers of profound energy, nor could he stop her from absorbing it. Yao Ji was so depressed that she was about to die. She could only shift her gaze to the surrounding magnetite mines. With a wave of her hand, she said, "Take all the magnetite away." The 20 or so Acacia sect disciples looked at each other with a bitter look on their faces. There were a lot of magnetite mines in the mountains here. Would the 20 of them be able to finish mining in a few months? Hurry up. If the people from the other 4 gates follow us, we'll have no chance. Yao Ji pointed forward with both hands, and the 20 or so disciples all stepped forward, preparing to run towards the mine. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The entire earth was shaking, and the 20 or so disciples immediately fell and rolled on the ground. Yao Ji barely managed to steady herself, and she turned to look at Duan Yu with an unsightly expression. What happened? Duan Yu was also astonished. The paradise is about to collapse? What? Yao Ji's face instantly turned green as if she had swallowed feces. What kind of joke was this? She hadn't even fished out a single strand of hair from the paradise, all right? How could this place collapse just like that? Then what about these magnetite mines? Why did her heart hurt so much? Her magnetite. Chapter 55. Yao Ji madly charged toward the magnetite mine, and the 20 or so subordinates couldn't stop her. Halfway there, her subordinates pounced on Yao Ji one after another, hugging her waist and thighs as they held her down. They repeatedly exclaimed, "Lord Yao Ji, don't. My lord, hurry and leave. It'll be too late if you don't leave now. Magnetite, my magnetite." Yao Ji crazily grabbed the hair of one of her subordinates who was hugging her waist. She pulled out a few strands of that unlucky fellow's black hair, causing him to cry out in pain. The front half of his head became barren in an instant. The subordinates' tears streamed down. Why were they, the loyal and devoted subordinates, always the ones suffering? At this time, the thick mystic energy surrounding Qiao Mu had dissipated at some point in time. When she stood up, she saw this chaotic scene, and the corner of her mouth twitched. They were all so old, yet they didn't have any sense of modesty. Arbor silently disdained the chaotic crowd and completely ignored the dumbfounded Duan Yu beside her. You. Duan Yu gulped. When he saw that Xiao Mu didn't look at him from beginning to end, he involuntarily swallowed his words. Such a devilish little monster actually appeared in such a small and lousy village. Could it be that she was some reclusive senior's final disciple? Ah, Lord Yao Ji. You can't go. The coitus sect subordinates hugging her thighs bitterly and silently shed tears. Lord Yao Ji had stomped countless times on their backs. Yao Ji held her head and howled in heartache. Her neat and elegant hair was messed up by her hands, and her head of pearls and jade was also crooked. Let's go. Yao Ji recovered her clarity at the last moment and fiercely glared at Arbor. She turned around and led the coitus sect disciples toward the tunnel they came from. However, the tunnel actually disappeared. The group stood there dumbfounded as they watched the tunnel that connected the Mystic Realms Valley to the outside world warp and disappear before their eyes. The entire Mystic Realm was in the midst of collapse, so it was normal for the tunnel to disappear. Because at this time, even the surroundings of the valley were being squeezed continuously. The magnetite mine that was originally very far away from them seemed to be pushing towards them step by step. Yao Ji's pupils shrank, her face filled with horror. The speed at which this secret realm was collapsing was too fast. In less than a few minutes, the magnetite mines around them had already pushed in front of them. The circle of 20 to 30 people was continuously shrinking, and the terror in their eyes was about to overflow. Stupid girl, I'll kill you. It was all this wretched girl's fault. If she had not rashly absorbed all the profound energy in this place, how could such a strange change have occurred? Even if she died, she would drag this wretched girl down with her. As the outer ring shrank, they stood less than 100 feet from where they stood. Before they knew it, Arbor and Duan Yu had arrived beside Yao Ji and the others. Yao Ji could reach out and pat Arbor's back, and Arbor was carefully looking at the peach blossom forest and lake that were evaporating bit by bit as the secret realm collapsed. Sigh, she let out a long sigh. In her previous life, the paradise that produced so many fresh and juicy peaches was destroyed just like that. Her heart also ached. Originally, she could have used it to temporarily avoid disaster, but now it was completely gone. While she was pondering, Yao Ji's sinister face and mystic energy-covered palm approached her from behind. Arbor was about to dodge when he suddenly heard Yao Ji and the others shriek. When he turned around, he saw more than 20 people falling down like dumplings. A large hole had opened up in the ground at some point in time. Arbor glanced at it and suddenly felt the air beneath his feet as he also fell down. Squeak, chirp chirp. The white squirrel panicked and it saw Xiao Mu running away, and it pounced on her in a panic. Chapter 56. The dozens of people's moods rose and fell like they were on a roller coaster. They thought they would be paralyzed from the fall, but they landed on the ground in the blink of an eye. They returned to the stone forest where they entered the mystic realm. A bunch of people rolled around defenselessly, their bodies bruised from all kinds of hard rocks. Xiao Mu was quite lucky and plopped down on the back of Duan Yu's head. She looked up at the sky in confusion. She reflexively extended a fair and tender hand and watched as a round, fist-sized pearl slowly fell into her hand. The youth's face turned green on the spot. He arched his head, and his handsome face flushed red. Arbor quickly patted his butt and stood up. Duan Yu stood up as if there were springs under his feet and angrily glared at Xiao Mu. The child ignored him and looked down at the pure white pearl in her hand. Her eyes gradually narrowed. So strange. Why did she feel like there was a peach blossom forest and lake water inside this transparent pearl? It looked quite familiar, like a miniature version of the paradise. Xiao Mu shook her small paws and turned the pearl upside down. She felt very magical as she watched the dark green lake water slowly ripple inside the pearl. This is the paradise's refinement. Duan Yu's eyeballs were about to fall out as he stared at Xiao Mu in bewilderment. What are you doing? How did you do it? He thought this child was only refining and absorbing the mystic energy inside the paradise. He didn't expect her to be so deranged as to refine the entire paradise. This method of directly refining a mystic realm only existed in secret histories. Duan Yu had once read about it in an ancient book, but it was completely different from seeing it with his own eyes. No wonder the paradise was collapsing. Think about it, the entire paradise was refined by the child, so how could it not collapse? What reason was there for it not to collapse? The child looked back at Duan Yu with an, "I don't know," and, "I didn't do it," expression, leaving him speechless. This child couldn't be the incarnation of some old monster, right? The paradise has been refined. Yao Ji reacted in an instant, unable to conceal the greed in her eyes. She grabbed the bead in the child's hand with one hand and struck the child's chest with the other. Arbor took a step back. His face was tense as he raised his black ferrule to block the attack. Boom! White mystic light scattered in all directions. Arbor forcefully suppressed his surging qi and blood and looked coldly at the shocked Yao Ji. This time, Yao Ji used the full strength of a level 7 mystic cultivator, but she still couldn't harm the child in the slightest. Yao Ji was shocked, and a shadow was cast over her heart. "What are you waiting for? Hurry and untie them." Duan Yu extended his bound hands to the child. This rope was quite interesting. No matter how hard the person who was tied up struggled, it was useless. However, an outsider only needed to gently pull at the knob to smoothly untie the rope. Arbor glanced at the young man and did not make things difficult for him. He pulled the rope from his hand and stuffed it into his pocket for his own use. As soon as Duan Yu regained his freedom, he took out a handful of nails and casually scattered them. Yao Ji spun around and retreated, her eyes furious. Just as she was about to regain her balance, a shadow suddenly swept past her like a black gale. Its 5 fingers formed a claw that was as pale as 5 chicken bones as it grabbed at Arbor's shoulder. Yao Ji's expression changed drastically, and she angrily shouted, "Ghost Saber, you dare to snatch in broad daylight." At the same time, Duan Yu reflexively jumped forward. Perhaps he was also a bit dumbfounded. Why did he rush out at this critical moment to shield the damn child and meet the Ghost Saber's claw head-on? Crack. Chapter 57. The poor youth's left shoulder bone was severely fractured by this black shadow's claw. Fine, adding insult to injury was his own doing. Duan Yu was still dumbfounded. He truly could not understand why his blood rushed to his head and he used his body to shield this stoic child. Especially when he turned around and saw the child's expressionless face, he chuckled. Qiao Mu's eyes flickered, and she took a step back. Only then did she clearly see the attacker. It was a middle-aged man dressed in black with a short beard. His small eyes emitted a vicious glint as he stared straight at the round bead in her hand. "Hand over the heart of paradise, and I'll spare your life, child," the middle-aged man in black coldly said with downcast eyes with one hand behind his back. Arbor's lips curled up, and she abruptly tightened her grip on the bead. She raised her small hand, and a pure white mystic energy light emitted from her palm and tightly wrapped around the bead. The child's stupefied expression, coupled with that pair of ferocious eyes, instantly made people's hearts tremble. Duan Yu glanced at the man in black and scoffed. "You want to take back something that fell into the child's hands?" Duan Yu had to hand it to her for being so naive despite her age. "You can give it a try. Will you snatch it faster or will I destroy it faster? At worst, we'll break up, and everyone can forget about it," the child said coldly as she stared at the man in black. Even though the large group of sect disciples brought by the man in black were glaring at her, the child's expression remained stoic. However, her clear eyes radiated a vicious aura, and her back was ramrod straight. Her entire body exuded an aura of sharpness. "Good, good, good, good." The middle-aged man in black glared venomously at the child. "Child, you're ruthless enough. You have some guts. Then tell me, what conditions do you want in exchange for giving the heart of paradise to me? You can't give it to him. Ghost Saber. You old bastard. I was the one who discovered the paradise first, and your ghost sect wants to interfere. Don't even think about it. Humph. The treasure is here, so we'll rely on our own abilities. Yao Ji, although the treasure is good, don't put the cart before the horse and lose your life for some good stuff. You have to think carefully about whether it's worth it or not. Ghost Blade. Yao Ji was so angry that her eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. She was currently in a disadvantageous situation, and the number of subordinates she had was obviously less than half of Ghost Sect's. In addition, her own cultivation was not as high as Ghost Saber's, so she could only watch anxiously from the side. The child's bright eyes shone like pearls, 2 stars in the sky. Her gaze coldly fell on the group of greedy faces in front of her. Suddenly, she raised her small hand and directly threw the pearl into her mouth in front of everyone, swallowing it with a gulp. Duan Yu was dumbstruck as he watched from the side. This child seemed to be even more savage than he had imagined. On the other hand, Gui Dao, Yao Ji, and the others were caught off guard as well. When they finally reacted, their faces had turned green and distorted. Gui Dao pulled out the ghost head blade from his waist. He was so angry that he laughed and was about to attack. Arbor covered his abdomen with one hand and said coldly, "Do it. Do it. Do you believe that I'll immediately self-detonate and leave you with nothing? Not only will you not obtain the treasure, but you'll also have to die here with me. All of you will die here with me." Everyone looked at her, flabbergasted. Duan Yu felt that the child's actions really refreshed his normal worldview again and again. Was she still a child? Huh? Was this level of savagery normal? Chapter 58. Ghost Saber released a murderous aura as he glared at the child in front of him. His clenched fists made cracking sounds. "Kill me. Kill me. Come." The child took a step forward with every word. Her soft and adorable voice sounded abnormally vicious in everyone's ears. Not to mention Duan Yu, even the surrounding people's worldviews were refreshed again and again. They felt that this child's viciousness was abnormal. You don't dare to attack. If you don't dare to attack, then die. Don't block the way. Trash. The child sneered with contempt in her eyes. You. Ghost Saber was so angry that he wished for nothing more than to slap this damn girl to death. Ever since he became an elder of the Ghost Sect, he could do whatever he wanted. He had never been as sullen as he was today. Damn girl, you're too arrogant and don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Ghost Saber shouted and grabbed at the child's slender arm with his left hand. Today, I'll let you know the difference in strength. Self-detonation. You don't have a chance. Ha! The distance between them was quite close, so Ghost Saber looked like he could easily capture her with this grab. Careful. Duan Yu hastily threw out a concealed weapon, but Ghost Saber did not even look at it and blocked it with his arm. He was focused on capturing the child. It would not be too late for him to cut open her stomach and take out the heart of paradise after he captured this brat and ruthlessly tortured her. Whoosh. To his surprise, the child flicked out a rope and quickly wrapped it around Ghost Saber's left arm. Before he could react, the child fiercely tightened the rope in his hand and kicked off with his left arm. The little one easily leaped over and sat on Ghost Blade's shoulder. The rope wrapped around Ghost Blade's left arm and quickly wrapped around his body. With a tight grip, the little one grabbed Ghost Blade's arm in his palm. Ghost Saber's current posture was strange. His left arm was draped over his right shoulder by the rope, and Duan Yu's nail had hit his arm. The child was facing him and happened to sit on the back of his hand. He was so angry that he raised his free right hand and was about to punch the back of the child's head. Bam! Child wasn't someone to be trifled with. She was one step ahead of him and slammed the ferrule on Ghost Blade's head. She quickly pressed the ferrule against his neck and said sternly, "Come on. Let's see who dies first." All around him were stiff figures and their eyes were wide open. Who could tell them, who was the one who taught this ghost-like child? Was he born cruel or something? Gui Dao felt the sticky blood dripping from his head. It dripped down his forehead and landed on the child's body. The child, however, completely turned a blind eye to it. She still had that wooden little face, but her eyes were abnormally bright. "Old man. Tell your men to go and kill those people." Yao Ji's expression changed. "Don't play tricks. You know that. Perhaps I might not have been able to kill you just now. But now, we're so close to each other. Even if I can't kill them, I'll definitely drag you down with me." The child's eyes were inches away from his face. Ghost Blade felt like he could bite the child's head off like a ball if he opened his mouth. However, he couldn't move. Only now did he realize that the child's seemingly suicidal approach to him was actually a preemptive strike. The damn girl's intelligence was simply not proportional to her appearance. Especially when she was right in front of him. Her eyebrows were bewitchingly raised as she leaned close to his face and whispered, "Have you died before? Do you know what death feels like?" For some reason, Ghost Saber felt chills all over his body, and a chill slowly crept up from the bottom of his heart. How was this pair of eyes like a living person's? Chapter 59. Heh heh. Ghost Blade's pupils dilated as he looked at the little girl in front of him. She made a sound that sounded like she was laughing, but her face didn't move at all, and there was no smile in her eyes. Her voice and expression were two completely different worlds. She was clearly a cute little girl, but she didn't have the slightest hint of softness and cuteness. Instead, he felt that she was filled with an eerie ghostly aura. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this child was more like a ghost than the members of the ghost sect. "What are you waiting for? Do it." A hint of impatience appeared in Arbor's eyes. Yao Ji started to look nervous. "Ghost Blade, think carefully. Even if you kill us now, with this girl's inhumane and rotten personality, she won't give you the heart of paradise. Why don't we work together? Kill them." Arbor suddenly exerted more force on the ferrule and pressed it down on Ghost Blade's neck. "Otherwise, you'll accompany me to the hell of all evil. Don't be afraid. Hell isn't as scary as you think. It's just a bit empty, desolate, and silent. That's all." Ghost Blade's body trembled. He didn't want to admit that he was actually scared by this ghostly girl in front of him. "Little Jojo, you're being naughty again." Suddenly, an ethereal and gentle voice came close and reached her side in a moment. Eh. It was the voice of that god of plague. Student Arbor was a bit confused. Why did it feel like she was running into that god of plague everywhere? While she was thinking, her little body broke free of Ghost Blade's grip and was pulled over by a strong suction force. She flopped twice and fell into a certain person's arms. Slap. The beautiful young man in white reached out his hand and slapped the child's buttocks heavily with a calm expression. His calm expression was completely inconsistent with his decisive action. Xiao Mu even felt her but hurt from the force of the slap, and her old face instantly flushed red. What the hell? Adding up her 2 lifetimes, she was already more than 30 years old. Yet, she was actually spanked by a demonic young man in broad daylight. This. The heavens clearly showed where the human heart was. A certain child who was about to throw a tantrum turned his head to glare at the youth and kicked him with his leg. She didn't know why, but she always felt that this young man's smiling, gentle and intelligent appearance was suppressing a violent heart. It was clearly a jade-like, handsome face that was like a spring breeze, but it actually made her feel the savagery and ruthlessness in the depths of his eyes, as well as the anger that surged along with it. The little kid was a little scared for no reason. Then, he became angry. How could he be scared? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but raise his voice. "What are you doing? Let them kill each other. How do you want to end it after you've dealt with them? The young man's voice was gentle, completely ignoring the dagger-like glint in the child's deliberately widened eyes. Xiao Mu looked at his smiling eyes and subconsciously swallowed her saliva. For some reason, she felt a little guilty. She then angrily flung her sleeves. What was she feeling guilty about? A certain child reacted quickly and glared at him angrily. What does it have to do with you? Pa! Her little butt was hit again. The smelly brat's attack was even heavier than before. She was so angry that her old face turned ashen. Her little teeth rubbed against each other, and she wanted nothing more than to bite off the young man's slightly tanned neck. How dare he? Spanking her butt again and again. Actually, there was no third way, but Xiao Mu was really furious. Life isn't easy. You have to cherish it. Mo Lien stared at her with a solemn and serious gaze and stopped smiling like a spring rain. Chapter 60. He really couldn't understand how a child could be so ruthless and completely disregard her own life in such a desperate situation. Especially when he heard her soft voice murmur, "Hell isn't as scary as you think. It's just a bit empty, desolate, and silent." He didn't know how to feel. What kind of courage and willpower did one need to truly disregard life and death? She was still so young. What exactly had happened to her that made her so indifferent to life and death? As for Arbor, how are you going to deal with them after you deal with them? In fact, she also knew that today's situation was almost a hopeless situation with no chance of survival. Her chances of winning were very small. If she made a mistake, she would die without a burial ground. Of course, she didn't plan to self-destruct. What she did before could only buy her some time. She wasn't afraid of death at all. She was just a bit unwilling. Of course, she didn't reincarnate to seek death. She wanted to live well. However, in that situation just now, even if she obediently handed over the heart of paradise, would this group of greedy people really let a child like her go? She was prepared to die, but if she took a gamble, she might still have a chance to live. At this moment, hearing this kid whisper in her ear, "Life isn't easy. You have to cherish it." Her heart couldn't help but tremble slightly. Although she knew this kid was worried about her, after being hit twice in a row where she shouldn't have been hit, the child's old face really couldn't swallow it. The child snorted and kicked him a few times. She looked down and saw that Crown Prince Lien's fine white robe had 7 or 8 black footprints printed on it. "Let go," the child said with a stoic face. Mo Lien shook his head and hugged her even tighter. He patted her back twice. "That won't do, it's dangerous right now. I'll put you down after we've dealt with these people, okay?" Although Crown Prince Lien asked, "Okay," his movements didn't seem to relax at all. He clearly didn't intend to let go. That, "okay," was just a casual question. The child was so angry that she had spoken so much to that whatever blade from the ghost sect. Now that she thought about it, she felt as if she had used up all her energy. She really didn't have any desire to speak, so she simply glared at Crown Prince Lien and shut her mouth. "Didn't I say that you can look for me anytime if you need anything in the future? Remember to call me next time. For example, in such a dangerous situation. Isn't it just right to call me? Don't worry, we can get rid of these annoying fellows in minutes." Xiao Mu really didn't want to ridicule him anymore. "Do you think you're a Xian beast that can run out and fight as soon as you're summoned?" Moreover, everyone knew that only mystic cultivators above level 10 had the chance to contract with mystic beasts, okay? With her current cultivation as a little level 3 mystic cultivator, she should see reality as soon as possible. Mo Lien smiled as she looked at the child's puffy cheeks. "You don't believe me? Look." His slender fingers slightly pointed upwards, and Arbor's eyes involuntarily looked up. His almond eyes, which were originally slightly squinted, suddenly widened. Fire? Bright red, Scalding flames, each the size of a fist, descended from the sky like a celestial maiden scattering flowers and attacked the flabbergasted ghost saber, Yao Ji, and the others. Xiao Mu reflexively reached out to cover her head, but she quickly discovered that the flames didn't come at her head at all. Instead, they directly bypassed her and Crown Prince Lien and chased after the others with whooshing sounds. Before long, half of the stone forest was engulfed in a sea of fire. Chapter 61. What is this? Ghost Saber hurriedly channeled mystic energy to block the flames, but the mystic energy enveloping his body was instantly incinerated by the scorching flames. Ghost Saber and the others were suddenly exposed to the fire, and before they could recover from their fright, they smelled the burning smell of people being roasted alive. To their horror and despair, the burning smell did not come from anywhere else but from their own bodies being roasted. Ghost Saber instantly turned into a burning man. His entire body was covered in flames as he blankly ran around, flailing his arms and pouncing on several unlucky ghost sect disciples. The heavenly fire descending from the sky instantly swallowed everyone into the sea of fire. No matter how they struggled or screamed, it was to no avail. Arbor, who was watching from the side, was rather calm. He slightly raised his head to look at the smiling Crown Prince Lien. This brat was truly a hypocrite. He was an incomparably ferocious fellow, but he wore a handsome and elegant facade like a banished immortal. He really knew how to act. However, on account of him taking care of this group of idiots, Xiaomu felt that the Crown Prince seemed to be a bit more pleasing to the eye today than in the past. No matter what, this brat had saved her life, so she could consider the matter of him spanking her butt and humiliating her old face in front of everyone a foregone. Mo Lien tapped her finger and took out a coiled hemp rope from the fire. A faint smile appeared on her lips. It's actually the spirit binding rope. This little toy is quite useful. The child naturally reached out to take it and frankly confiscated the hemp rope, casually stuffing it into his clothes as his own. Mo Lien couldn't help but smile. This child was truly adept at silently collecting treasures. Every time he did something bad, his face would be stoic and serious. He was truly adorable. She couldn't resist pinching the child's fleshy cheeks, but she received an unhappy glare from a certain child in return. Slap. She forcefully slapped his hand away and suddenly recalled the miserable Duan Yu. He couldn't have been swallowed by the sea of fire, right? This miserable fellow had saved her just now. Arbor twisted his small body and turned half a circle. His gaze swept back and forth in the sea of flames, searching for Duan Yu's whereabouts. However, aside from where she and Crown Prince Lien were standing, fire was spreading everywhere in the stone forest, and visibility was extremely low. Arbor couldn't find any trace of Duan Yu after searching for a long time, and her delicate brows involuntarily furrowed. Don't worry, the kid from the hidden weapons family has the ability to protect himself, so he would have run away long ago. Mo Lien turned her little face back. Let's go home. It was time to go home. With such a delay, it was estimated that it would take an entire night. Mother was probably going crazy with anxiety. Arbor lowered her eyes and subconsciously looked into her dantian. She saw that the heart of paradise that she had swallowed was being hugged by the two intertwining branches of the sapling. It was strangely tight as if it was hugging it. Arbor blinked and tried to squeeze the little tree with his profound energy, making it let go. Who would have thought that the sapling would throw out a few more soft branches, holding on tightly without letting go? It freaking became a spirit. Arbor angrily withdrew her mystic energy. She couldn't understand why there was a strange tree growing in her dantian. Was there really no problem with this dantian? Wouldn't it hinder her cultivation on the right path in the future? No, she had to try again. Xiao Mu held her breath and drew out a large amount of mystic energy stored in her mystic meridians. She directly transferred it into her dantian and fought with the sapling for the heart of paradise. Chapter 62. The two sides fought a tug-of-war for a while before the sapling finally let go, unwillingly. However, the strange thing was that Arbor seemed to be able to sense the sapling's indignation. He could even see it wailing in her dantian, shaking its trunk, and shaking its branches to point at the heavens and curse the earth. Ha! How could a tree become a spirit? Was this dantian still her dantian? Did she still want to make the decision? Did they ask for her permission before becoming a spirit and causing mischief? This kind of abnormal behavior should be ruthlessly slapped to death before talking about it. Jojo? Xiao Mu recovered her wits and pushed away Mo Yen, who was close to her face. She opened her mouth and spat out a round, jade-like bead. How do I use this? Those people wanted to snatch her heart of paradise with twisted expressions. They couldn't have some ulterior motive, right? Yu Xiu, who had just finished taking care of some lackeys, appeared with a person in his hand and stared at the round bead in the little fellow's palm in astonishment. Wow! That's a miniature version of the paradise. How did this savage little girl refine the entire paradise and take it for herself? A hint of surprise also flitted through Mo Yen's eyes, but it was more of a smile. He raised his hand and rubbed the little fellow's head. You're a child with good fortune. He didn't ask her the reason behind the paradise's refinement, which made the little fellow feel a bit better. To be honest, even if he asked, she wouldn't freaking know what had happened. However, she had a faint feeling that the paradise's direct refinement was most likely related to the tree that suddenly appeared in her dantian. However, she wouldn't tell anyone about such a strange thing like having a tree in her dantian. Moreover, with her current cultivation as a small level 3 mystic cultivator, being able to see her dantian was not a normal thing in the first place. Mo Yen didn't say anything else and directly instructed Xiao Mu to permeate her mystic energy into the heart of paradise. The bead immediately released a dazzling light and instantly soared into the air. As if drawing a mirage in the air, the entire paradise was endlessly magnified in front of her eyes. Within minutes, a translucent valley appeared in the sky. The sound of a gurgling stream and the fragrance of a peach tree assaulted her senses. Most importantly, the undulating magnetite mines around the valley were now in this miniature version of the heart of paradise. She could use them at any time. Little Qiao had lived for 2 lifetimes, so there weren't many things that could excite her. However, at this moment, even if she was mature and calm, she couldn't help but feel excited. Yu Xiu was already dumbfounded, his eyeballs almost falling to the ground. Who would have thought that the peach blossom spring that so many noble clans had been searching in secret to no avail would actually be refined into the heart of peach blossom by an unknown little girl from a mountain village? With a thought, Arbor moved the unburned stones under her feet to the paradise. With another thought, the stones returned to their original position. Ha 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 ha. This was truly a treasure. Great, I can finally store and withdraw items as I please. It wasn't like that damned inner world where he couldn't take things out without enough mystic sense. This peach blossom spring only needed a little mystic energy to take out large items. It simply couldn't be any more convenient. The child immediately grinned happily. Her paralyzed expression showed signs of cracking for the first time, and a strange smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Crown Prince Lien, who was staring at her, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This little fellow's smile was so strange, as if she had never smiled before. The corners of her mouth were stretched rather stiffly. Chapter 63. If the Crown Prince knew that the reason why the little fellow was so happy was only because the heart of paradise could allow her to store and withdraw items as she wished, he probably wouldn't know what to say. Her expectations were too low. Furthermore, our dear student Arbor still didn't know that every time she wanted to retrieve the heart of paradise, she would have to fight with the strange tree for it. Would it really be easier than using her own inner world? Before retrieving the paradise, our dear student Xiao Mu had even secretly tested whether she could send herself into the paradise. In the end, it was obvious that she had thought too highly of herself. Her original body couldn't enter the miniature paradise. Our dear student Xiao Mu pursed her lips and looked worriedly at the undulating magnetite veins outside the paradise. These magnetite veins had to be truly mined. Since her original body couldn't enter, she probably wouldn't be able to extract large amounts of magnetite veins just by relying on a wisp of mystic energy. Sigh, Arbor felt a little regretful. She retrieved the round bead and swallowed it in one gulp. Using her inner sight, she indeed saw the sapling caressing the heart of paradise back and forth, looking as if it wouldn't give up even if it died. Arbor felt even more of a headache. If she couldn't figure out this demonic tree, she wouldn't be at ease with her dantian. If the thickness of one's mystic veins was not only related to the amount of mystic energy one possessed, but also directly affected one's cultivation speed in the later stages, then the dantian was even more important. It was the place where all the mystic energy in the body was stored. The mystic energy cultivated in the mystic veins would eventually return to the dantian. And such an important place was currently occupied by an inexplicable tree. This made her feel uneasy. Arbor looked back at Mo Yen and happened to see him clench his fingers. A fiery red object in the shape of a lamp wick floated into his palm. He lightly grasped it, and it disappeared into thin air. The child curiously grabbed his hand and flipped it open to take a look. There was nothing there. What was that just now? Although this crown prince looked gentle, Arbor felt that this brat's methods were very cruel. Crown Prince Lien said indifferently, "Oh, that's Ghost Saber's life lantern." For a second-rate sect like the Ghost Sect, the elders, protectors, or consecrators would usually light up an everlasting life lamp in the sect. The moment the life lamp is lit, these people's life spirits will have a connection with the life lamp. Arbor immediately understood and nodded. Ghost Blade is dead now. That's right, he's dead. The life lamp that he lit in the sect also went out. What about the wick just now? That is the miniature life lamp that is engraved in his life soul. When a person dies, this miniature life lamp will quickly capture the scene of the last moment. It can quickly transmit the cause of the incident to the sect. So just now, that grab had taken away Ghost Blade's last hope. This was the difference in strength. The suppression of cultivation made you so miserable that you didn't even have the chance to send a message. Yu Xiu waited for his master to finish explaining to the village girl before taking 2 steps forward with the person in his hand. Master, this woman has a mystic weapon that repels fire. This subordinate has already destroyed it. A tattered sandalwood fan that had withered into 2 halves was thrown to the ground by Yu Xiu like trash. Only now did Arbor see clearly that the woman he had thrown to the ground without any pity was Coitus Sect's left protector, Yao Ji. Yao Ji had long since lost her graceful and charming appearance. She sat on the ground like a beggar. Her hair was disheveled, her face dirty, and her eyes red. Chapter 64. Her hair was like weeds from the fire, and locks drooped down from her head. Her lips were slightly cracked from the heat, and she sat there in a daze with a confused expression. Yu Xiu went up and kicked her, then turned to say to Mo Yen, "Master, this woman is pretending to be crazy and acting dumb." Yao Ji wasn't acting dumb like Yu Xiu said. She had indeed been scared silly. Coitus Sect was considered an upper-class sect, but even she, a left guardian with a rather lofty status in the sect, had never seen someone who could destroy so many people with a flip of his hand. It was as if they were ants in his eyes. Everyone, including the level 8 mystic cultivator Ghost Saber, couldn't survive for more than 3 seconds in this youth's hands. A trace of fear overflowed from the bottom of Yao Ji's heart. Mo Yen didn't even bother to look at her and merely said coldly, "Clean it up." This kind of trash dared to attack little Jojo. She was an eyesore and truly lived up to the saying that she valued money more than her life. Mo Yen's words seemed to have triggered a certain nerve in Yao Ji. She howled and pounced forward, repeatedly begging for mercy, but Mo Yen unceremoniously kicked her far away. After receiving the order, Yu Xiu didn't waste words and aggressively pulled out his sword and walked toward Yao Ji. Seeing that the sword was about to land on Yao Ji's head, the latter was so frightened that her face drained of color, and she shrieked. Wait! The little girl suddenly stretched out 5 fingers. Yu Xiu's chopping motion froze in midair. Mo Lian cast him a sidelong glance and waved her hand to dismiss him. She lowered her head to look at the little girl in her arms. What is it? Do you dislike the smell of blood? I'll have someone throw her far away and dispose of her. Yu Xiu. Master is starting to be particular. But aren't you afraid of leading the little girl astray by saying this in front of such a savage and unrestrained little girl? Looking at the two people's relaxed expressions, those who didn't know would think that the two of them were chatting about the weather and the weather. Arbor tilted his small head. Is there any way to make her listen to me? I don't dare to have any thoughts of resistance. Why do you want such a trash? Mo Lian pursed her lips in disdain. She patted her head and said, if you need help, I can get Yu Xiu to follow you. Yu Xiu wanted to cry. His Highness was sending him away without any reluctance. Qiao Mu unceremoniously slapped the back of his hand. You're not allowed to touch my head. She was not a stuffed animal. We need to keep this woman. Arbor stared at Mo Lian, who was right in front of him. Is there any way? Mo Lian nodded. Arbor knew that this guy had a way, and this method was quite straightforward. Mo Lian raised her hand and sucked Yao Ji's head into her hand, suppressing it and extracting a strand of her life spirit. Regardless of how tragic Yao Ji's cries were, Mo Lian handed a thin, transparent strand of life spirit to Qiao Mu in just a few seconds. If she doesn't listen, you can crush this strand of life spirit in your hand at any time. At that time, she naturally won't have a good ending, Mo Lian said calmly. Arbor's eyes brightened. He nodded and threw the strand of life spirit into his inner world. It wouldn't take much mystic sense to extract a small life spirit. Actually, if he absorbed this strand of life spirit into his conscious, it would be more convenient to control it with mystic sense. However, her mystic sense body had just formed, and there was very little mystic sense in her conscious. To avoid any unexpected changes, it was better to lock up this life spirit in his inner world for now. Chapter 65. Arbor had finally witnessed Mo Lian's methods. Not only did she not find them cruel, she even found them to be very agreeable. The woman in front of her could even lay her hands on a 7-year-old child. It could be considered karma for her to end up like this. Yao Ji, who had a strand of her soul taken away, slumped to the ground listlessly. She shot a resentful gaze at Arbor, as if she wanted to bore a hole in her face. Arbor did not care about this gaze at all. However, Mo Lian was displeased when she saw the old woman's gaze. She raised her hand and slapped her across the air. If you dare to look at people like that again, I'll gouge your eyes out. Yao Ji flipped over from the strike and fell limply to the ground. She spat out a mouthful of blood and lost a few teeth. Her eyes were filled with horror and fear, replacing her previous resentment. The child expressionlessly said, "Come here." Yao Ji subconsciously shrank back and struggled to crawl to the two. This time, she did not dare to raise her head to look at these two fiends. I know you're resentful. The child raised her small brows. Do you regret not killing me in the beginning? Yao Ji trembled, as if she could feel the white-clothed youth's sword-like gaze landing on her. Yao Ji had suffered before, so how would she dare to act rashly? She lowered her head and crawled at their feet. Little master, please forgive me. Yao Ji does not dare. Arbor indifferently glanced at her. How will you talk about today's matter when you return to the sect? Yao Ji hastily replied, Little master, don't worry. Yao Ji will not say anything. Arbor unhappily cut her off. Why are you so stupid at your age? If you don't say anything, wouldn't it be even more suspicious? So infuriating. Why is it so troublesome to talk to idiots? Qiao Mu's gaze shifted to Crown Prince Lian's face. She blinked and gave him a look. Mo Yen almost laughed out loud. Beside her, Yu Xiu could not help but roll his eyes. Child, what do you think His Highness is in your stomach? One look from you and others will immediately understand. After you go back, tell them that a mysterious expert killed all of you. It wasn't easy for you to escape back to report the news, so you have to act more realistically. After he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve and sent the unlucky Yao Ji flying several meters away. Yao Ji let out a miserable howl as she spat out a large mouthful of blood. One of her arms hung limply by her side, obviously broken. Her face was completely pale, and with her withered hair and beggar clothes, no one would believe that she wasn't a beggar. If you dare to come back and cause trouble, then there's no meaning for your sect to exist. Mo Yen glanced at Yao Ji and waved her hand. You'll know what to say when you return. I understand, I understand. Yao Ji immediately let out a sigh of relief. She repeatedly kowtowed and fled. Arbor's eyes flashed. Speaking of which, she didn't care if this group of people rushed back to seek revenge. Counting the days, this peaceful world wouldn't last for more than 2 days. When the time came, it was hard to say if this village would still exist. What was there to be afraid of? She already planned to leave. However, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. She also couldn't be sure if those 2 sects would send people to investigate. If they found out that she was the one who obtained the Heart of Paradise, it would be annoying if they bit her like rabid dogs and refused to let her go. Little Jojo, I'm leaving tomorrow to return to the capital. Don't do those dangerous things alone. When the moon is dark and the wind is strong, don't wander around too much, okay? I'll come back to see you after a while. Chapter 66. The child harumphed. Mo Yen poked her stoic little face in amusement. Aside from being able to store items, the Heart of Paradise can also absorb and store mystic energy from the outside world. However, you must remember to take out the Heart of Paradise without being noticed. You must be extremely careful. Arbor nodded, thinking that this was indeed the case. She didn't want to provoke a large group of people from some sect to besiege and kill her, so she shouldn't be too pleased with herself. She still had to be careful when using it. The supplies you want should arrive tomorrow or the day after. Remember to receive them. As expected of His Highness the Crown Prince, he could gather supplies so quickly in this kind of desolate little mountain village. Although our dear Qiao Mu's stoic little face didn't have any expression, Mo Yen felt that this little girl was very happy. Yu Xiu silently followed behind his master. Seeing him nag endlessly, he looked at Arbor with a complicated expression. He had never seen his crown prince so carefully instruct others. This savage little girl was inexplicably to the crown prince's liking. Qiao Mu tilted her head and met his eyes. Her round, bright eyes blinked, and she suddenly asked, "That Auntie Wu, where did you send her?" This crown prince truly acted quickly. That Wu Yanjun had disappeared from the village the night of the fire. The next day, his husband had even called a bunch of people to search the village for her. Unfortunately, even if he brought people to dig 3 feet into the ground, his Madame Wu still wouldn't be able to come back. The crown prince chuckled and looked at little Jojo. Don't worry, I threw her into Black City to mine magnetite. There's no return from that kind of place. She won't be able to leave until she dies. Arbor's eyes flashed. She had indeed heard of Black City. It was close to the western wilderness and could be considered the source of heavenly Dao sex or mining. To the pampered Auntie Wu, that kind of bitter cold place where one had to mine rocks and toil all day long was probably a life akin to hell. Keep all of these well. The crown prince casually stuffed her with a cloth bag sewn with brocade thread. Then, he carried her and soared up. Stepping on the heavy fire, they passed through the smoke-shrouded stone forest. Classmate Arbor opened the bag and stretched his head out to take a look. Seeing that it was all kinds of high-grade ointments to stop bleeding, relieve pain, remove scars, disperse blood stasis, and so on, he hurriedly put them all in his pocket and happily accepted them all. Mo Lien flew towards Quoto village with the child in her arms. She walked in the air as if she was walking on flat ground. Little Qiao's gaze was slightly complicated as she stole a few glances at him. After weighing her options, she finally opened her mouth. You. It's a long journey back to the capital. Be careful. If you encounter a slow and rotting monster, it's best to stay away. However, with his inhuman strength, he shouldn't be at a disadvantage even if he encountered a corpse puppet in a completely clueless situation. Mo Lien raised her eyebrows slightly. Although she didn't quite understand what the little fellow meant, she still nodded and couldn't help but pinch her cheeks. Little thing, you're worried about me. Scram. Little Jojo stretched out her leg and angrily kicked his white robe, adding another black footprint to his robe. You're not allowed to pinch my face. Following behind the two, Yu Xiu's mouth twitched as he looked at the two people in front of him. He felt that there was something wrong with this scene. What's wrong? Yu Xiu thought for a long time, then slapped his thigh and had a flash of inspiration. Why was his handsome, charming, and lovable lord always suffering in the hands of this little girl and getting beaten up at the slightest provocation? Chapter 67. After Mo Lien carried Xiao Mu away into the distance, a lump of earth and rock that had been scorched and loosened by the fire continued to writhe. Suddenly, a little white squirrel popped out. On its cute little furry face, a pair of intelligent big eyes were opened wide. Squeak! The little white squirrel made a pitiful cry. Where is the little master? Why is the little master missing? Little master, little master, little master. If someone was here, they would definitely see the little white squirrel's tearful face. It hopped on the spot for a while and sniffed around before pinpointing the direction that Mo Lien had left in with Xiao Mu in his arms. With a squeak, it dashed out of the stone forest entangled in flames with a few swishes. At this time, the raging flames had spread over the entire stone forest, but to the little white squirrel, it didn't seem to affect it at all. The billowing smoke caused the visibility to be extremely low, but the little white squirrel seemed to not notice the raging flames in its surroundings. Its speed increased again, and it passed through the stone forest that was surging with flames like a bolt of lightning. It squeaked as it chased after Qiao Mu with all its might. Little master, wait. The little master saved its life, so she was its second parent. It must follow, follow. Arbor didn't know that a silly little white squirrel was running after her to the village, swearing to follow her. After she was carried out of the stone forest by Mo Lien, she kept poking his shoulder with her fingers and repeating, "Put me down." Mo Lien saw that the little girl's home was in front of him, so he put her down. Seeing that the little girl silently turned around and was about to run away, Mo Lien, who was already familiar with the little girl's tricks, picked her up and put her in front of him again. Arbor angrily stepped on his foot. What? Do you remember what I told you? Mo Lien looked at her with a smile. The little girl glanced at him. Although he was smiling, his eyes were very serious. Her little face couldn't help but become gloomy, and she nodded as a response. Mo Lien stretched out his finger and tapped her little nose, then let's see each other in a few days. Go home. I don't even know if we'll meet again. The little fellow muttered quietly. Behind her, Mo Lien raised his slender eyebrows as he watched the little one's receding figure with a grin. Sigh, this little fellow doesn't even know how to say goodbye. Looks like I'll have to teach him slowly in the future. As for whether or not they would meet again, they would know when they met. Mo Lien stopped at the end of the path and looked in the direction where the child had left. She slowly withdrew her gaze. I heard that third imperial brother went to the old man and complained tearfully. The effect was very obvious. Mo Lien said softly. She turned and walked towards the inn at the entrance of the village. Pack your things. We'll leave early tomorrow morning. I'll go back and see what else my good imperial brother can do other than crying, making a scene, and threatening to hang himself. Yu Xiu, who was accompanying them, let out a sigh of relief. He hurriedly nodded and followed the crown prince's footsteps. His grandpa should have gone back a long time ago. This trip out had witnessed a miracle. In the end, no one had gained anything. The entire mystic realm had become a child's. No one would dare to believe this kind of thing. Arbor quickly ran to the entrance of her house. She was anxious to return home. Just as she stepped through the threshold, she heard a strange voice coming from her little courtyard. Yo, the main character is finally back. A scalding hot teacup was thrown at her little face. Arbor's eyes hardened. She dodged to the side and looked over. She saw the matriarch and a group of people sitting there as if they were being interrogated. Chapter 68. Anyone who stepped into their own small courtyard and was met with the sudden attack of a hot teacup would not be able to hold back their anger. Arbor was no exception. Although her little face was still expressionless, the anger in her eyes could no longer be suppressed, and a cold aura emanated from her body. She looked up and saw old madam sitting on a chair in the middle of the courtyard. Her youngest aunt Xiao Wenwan and youngest aunt Su Jiao were standing on either side of her. The two guards glared at Arbor, who had just entered the door, with disdain and ridicule in their eyes. Arbor was furious that her house was occupied by old madam and her people. Her eyes were filled with irritation. Glancing at old madam expressionlessly, Arbor walked toward her room without looking back. She was too lazy to talk to them. Whoever wanted to talk to them could talk to them. In any case, she didn't want to talk to this old woman. This condescending attitude infuriated elderly Lady Qiao so much that she shot up from her seat and angrily rebuked while pointing at Xiao Mu, "Halt! Kneel!" Old Madame Wang was so angry that her fingertips trembled. She had been in charge of the Qiao family for so many years, and her son and daughter-in-law had always respected her and obeyed her orders. She had never seen such a rude person who dared to ignore her imperial edict and despise her right to be in charge of the family. This was outrageous. Arbor had been tense for so long, and she finally got home to rest for a while. Who knew that old Madame Wang would be waiting for her here? It really made her angry. Two older women walked forward with their hands on their hips and blocked Arbor's door from both sides, trapping her in the small courtyard. Arbor's eyes were so cold that shards of ice could be seen. She looked at the two older women blocking her way as if she was looking at a corpse. "Get out of my way, or don't blame me for being rude. How dare you? How dare you go against the heavens?" Wang Shi was so angry that the veins on her forehead were throbbing. "Whoever stops me from resting, I'll make her pay the price." Using a soft baby voice to say such murderous words, it really made people stare at her in shock. "I'll see if you dare. You!" Bang bang. Arbor raised his leg and kicked the legs of the two older female servants. With two cracking sounds, the two older female servants screamed at the same time. They were in so much pain that their waists bent down. Su Jiao was dumbstruck for a moment before letting out an ear-piercing shriek. "You damn lass, you really dared to lay your hands on your grandmother's people. Are you deaf? I've already warned you to get out of the way. Is my words so hard to understand?" Arbor sneered and punched the belly of one of the women, sending her flying several meters away. She howled and fell at the feet of the old lady. The other old maid was so scared that her face turned pale and she retreated. There was no need for Arbor to do anything. She rolled and crawled to the old lady's feet and cried, "Ancestor, help me. Ancestor, help me." Extremely boring. Arbor's eyes flashed with a cold light as he glanced at the old lady expressionlessly. Old Madame Wang jumped in fright from her emotionless gaze, and she staggered back 2 steps, almost falling down. Everyone scrambled to support this old lady. Old Madame Wang was so angry that her chest was trembling, and her lips trembled as she cursed, You little bastard, you actually dared to lay your hands on your elders. Hurry! Hurry and hold this little bastard down. Beat her ruthlessly, beat her to death. Chapter 69. Elderly lady truly came prepared this time. Not only did she bring 4 to 5 crude midwives, she also brought 2 grandnephews from her maternal family who knew a bit of martial arts. Those 2 grandnephews were about 14 to 15 years old. Upon hearing elderly lady's command, they rushed forward like hotheads. One of them reached out to grab Arbor, while the other swept his leg to kick Arbor's legs. In Arbor's eyes, their slow speed was like a snail's crawl, yet they wanted to hit her. Simply laughable. Arbor immediately broke free of the 2's encirclement with a flash of his body. In turn, he slapped the 2 grandnephews in the face. This little bastard was hitting them for her to see. Elderly lady almost vomited blood from anger when she saw this. She felt like these 2 slaps were landing on her own face, causing her to lose all face. Still not stopping. Arbor coldly looked at the 2 grandnephews of the Wang family. His gaze was so cold that the 2 youths couldn't help but shiver. You aren't my match. Arbor very calmly stated this fact. He truly had no interest in bullying 2 normal martial artists without mystic energy. This kind of person indeed had an advantage in front of weak commoners, but in front of mystic cultivators, they were completely lacking. Elderly Lady Wang's 2 grandnephews weren't too stupid. They didn't dare to refute Arbor's words and returned to elderly lady's side dejectedly. When elderly lady saw that no one could restrain Arbor, she was so angry that she directly collapsed onto the ground and wailed like a shrew. She kept saying that her descendants were unfilial and that she couldn't live anymore. Su Jiao raised a handkerchief to wipe the corner of her mouth. She slanted her eyes and secretly made an expression of extreme disdain for elderly lady. Arbor coldly glanced at the old woman who was putting on a good show and directly walked around her to the door. He pushed open the door with one hand and turned to show elderly lady a disdainful gaze. He coldly said, If you can't live, then just die. For an old bitch like you, living is also a waste of food. If you really want to die, then please find a sturdier pillar to ram your head against. You've spent so much effort and time to put on such an act, yet you still won't die in the end. Who are you trying to impress? Your acting is so clumsy, and it's hard to get a bunch of people to cooperate with you. You guys are really too much. Everyone stared at her, dumbfounded. Even the old lady stopped making noise and stared blankly at the cold-faced child. Was it possible for a child to say such vicious and cunning words? Arbor, how dare you speak to your grandmother like that? His father, Xiao Zhongbang, roared at the door. Xiao Mu coldly glanced in his direction before slamming the door with a bang, directly flinging the door board shut in front of everyone's eyes. Son, I really can't live anymore. The old lady seemed to be stuck for 3 seconds. When she saw Xiao Zhongbang, she continued to slap her thigh, crying and wailing. She looked like she had suffered a great grievance, and tears streamed down her face. Jojo, it's Jojo who's back. As soon as Wei Ziqin heard that the child had come home, she hurried back. She didn't even have time to look at elderly lady before she ran straight to her daughter's room. Arbor had just wiped her face when she heard her mother's voice. She quickly opened the door and welcomed her mother's warm hands. Wei Ziqin immediately picked Arbor up and said anxiously and angrily, Where did you run off to for a day and a night? Your father and I had a hard time looking for you. Mother, I'm back now. Arbor was already an adult. How could she be used to being held in her mother's arms? She quickly wriggled and slid down to the ground. She reached out and tugged at the corner of her mother's clothes. Mother, let's talk inside. Chapter 70. How could Wei Ziqin let go of her hand? She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes as she said, Child, I asked your teacher Jiang. Yesterday, school ended very early, and the other students also got home early. Where did you go? Arbor had already thought of an excuse on the way back. She changed the story of Yao Ji and company and said that she was almost abducted after school. Fortunately, she was rescued by a young swordsman, and it took some twists and turns before she was able to return. Wei Ziqin only felt that this matter was abnormally dangerous when she heard it. She quickly hugged her child and prayed for the heavens to protect her with a ghastly pale face. Arbor comforted her with a few words before someone banged on the door. Wei Ziqin hesitated for a moment before holding Arbor's hand and saying, "Yesterday, your dad brought people to search for you in and out of the village for the entire night. Actually, it's not that he doesn't care about you." Arbor faintly hummed in acknowledgement. Wei Ziqin looked at her daughter's ice-cold face and couldn't help but sigh. She could also tell that Jojo was simply indifferent to her dad these past few days. He didn't even call him Dad anymore. Ever since Su Jiao came knocking on their door and escorted Xiao Qiao to the inn to apologize to Miss Lu, Xiao Qiao practically didn't look her father in the eye. Although this child didn't say anything, her heart must have been hurt by her father. "Jojo, are you blaming your dad?" Knock 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 knock. The sound of the door shaking vigorously interrupted Wei Ziqin's words. Wei Ziqin glanced outside the door a bit nervously. "Jojo, you don't say anything when we go out later. Mom will deal with it." Judging from elderly lady's attitude, it seemed that she wouldn't let them off if they didn't give an explanation today. "Mom." Arbor calmly looked at her mother. Her pitch-black eyes were very bright, and Wei Ziqin could see her own reflection in her daughter's clear eyes. "I've been having a strange dream every day for the past few days." Arbor's tone was quite gentle, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. "I dreamed that my sister was sent to a rich family, but no one really treated her as a human. They beat her, scolded her, humiliated her, and enslaved her every day. By the time she was 12, her sister had died. She was swept out of the house like a pile of trash. Her clothes didn't cover her body, and she lay in the pouring rain with her eyes open. Because in their eyes, she's just trash. If she dies, then so be it. There's nothing pitiful about it." Wei Ziqin's pupils constricted in horror. She rushed forward and covered her daughter's mouth. She shook her head vigorously and said, "No, no, Jojo, how could you have such a terrible dream? This was a dream, just a dream. Mother has already decided that no one can take Shaolin away from us. Mother has decided that no one can take my child away from mother's side. Even your grandmother can't make decisions for mother." Arbor reached out and pulled her mother's hand away. The corners of her mouth twitched, and she tried to show a stiff smile. "I think so too, mother. No one can make decisions for themselves and decide Shaolin's fate. I'll be responsible for her life until the end. Mother, this time, Jojo will be the one to protect you." Wei Ziqin's face was already covered in tears. She didn't know why she was crying, but she felt suffocated in her chest, and her tears flowed uncontrollably. She was a mother. She couldn't be weak. If she backed down, her daughter would have no way out. Wei Ziqin held Arbor's hand tightly. She stood up with a determined expression and pulled the door open. Chapter 71. Arbor silently followed behind her mother and followed her into the courtyard. Elderly lady had stopped crying for the time being, and she pretended to wipe her tears as she furtively cast sidelong glances at the mother and daughter pair. "Arbor!" Qiao Zhongbang roared angrily. When he looked up to see his wife shielding his daughter behind her as though she was afraid that he would eat her up, he couldn't help but be angered to the point that his heart ached. What did his wife mean by this? Could it be that she would tear apart and eat her daughter? Elderly lady. Wei Ziqin poked the soft knife in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing as she dryly said, "May I ask why you brought so many people here in such a grand manner? The child is still young and can't take fright easily. If she's frightened to death, who can compensate me with a good daughter? Elderly Lady Qiao's eyes instantly turned round, and she scrutinized Wei Ziqin again as though she didn't recognize her daughter-in-law. Wei Ziqin had been married into the family for so many years, but she had never called her elderly lady, in a cold and sarcastic voice like today. Eldest sister-in-law, what kind of attitude is this? Su Jiao immediately interjected, from the looks of it, you probably don't know that your child nearly angered mother to the point of fainting just now. Do you know what your child called mother just now? I'm too embarrassed to say it out loud. Old bitch, Arbor coldly replied. Everyone stared at her, dumbstruck, as though they didn't recognize this child. Qiao Zhongbang flared up on the spot and raised his hand to slap Arbor's face as he glowered at her. Shut up. Arbor didn't dodge and merely stared at her father with a bone-chilling gaze. That serene and chilly gaze made Qiao Zhongbang's heart tremble slightly, and his hand involuntarily froze in midair, unable to swing down anymore. It's good that all of you are here today. Arbor's gaze swept across everyone's faces. Wait a moment. We'll talk when everyone is here. Everyone in the yard was silent. It took a long time for the old lady to find her voice again. She pointed at Arbor and said in a trembling voice, Rebel, rebel, rebel. Qiao Zhongbang looked at his mother, who was trembling with anger, then turned to look at his daughter, whose face was as cold as ice. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Third great-grandfather and old village chief are here, the 10-year-old Xiao Hu called out and ran into the courtyard. Thank you for your hard work, brother Hu. Arbor nodded slightly at Xiao Hu, then bowed to the Qiao family elders and the village chief who had just entered. Third great-grandfather, Grandpa Village Chief. Today, I invited the two of you here because I need the two of you to bear witness to something. Grandmother was not kind. She repeatedly targeted the two of us. She ignored my mother's wishes and insisted on selling my younger sister to a rich family. She tried in vain to break up our family and make us suffer so much that we wished we were dead. Secondly, he didn't care about my life and forced me to risk my life many times. This time, he actually brought people to our door to capture me. I'm so young and fearful. I don't know how I've become an eyesore to grandmother. I've blocked grandmother's path and made her want to deal with me time and time again. If the family really can't tolerate my younger sister and me, then it would be better to expel us from the family. We don't ask for glory or riches, we just ask for peace and freedom. We don't need to live in fear under grandmother's pressure every day. The old lady looked at third great-grandfather's stern gaze and her lips trembled. She was so angry that she wanted to faint. Was this child possessed by a ghost? How could she say such a sentence with every word that hit his heart? Seeing the disdainful gazes from third great-grandfather and the village chief, the old lady's face burned. She wanted nothing more than to close her eyes immediately. Such a small child. How much had he suffered to be able to say something like expelling himself from the family? Chapter 72. Elderly lady felt her face burning, and her lips trembled, but she couldn't say anything. Originally, it was just a small family matter that could be resolved behind closed doors. Who would have thought that the damn girl would invite the two most powerful people in the village today? With this fuss and publicity, the good reputation she had accumulated for more than a decade was completely ruined. Where was she going to put her old face? Wouldn't she be laughed to death by the people in and out of the village? You. Elderly lady pointed at Xiao Mu. She was simply caught off guard by Xiao Mu's preemptive strike. Enough. Third great-grandfather said to Wang Nei with a straight face, old fifth daughter-in-law, I warned you 2 years ago that you shouldn't meddle too much in the children's family matters. Let them handle it themselves. Originally, our branch was separated from the main family and arranged to live in this small mountain village. It's fine as long as we can live our own lives. Our children and grandchildren are growing up day by day, and those who should be separated have also been separated out. Let them fly and live their own lives, and you can also have more leisure. Ever since old fifth passed away, I also know that old fifth daughter-in-law hasn't had it easy, but you have to meddle in the younger generation's matters for everything. Aren't you tired? I think Jojo, this child, is quite good and promising. He has already advanced to the ranks of mystic cultivators at such a young age. His future is limitless, the old village chief also interjected from the side. Look at how you've forced such a good child. Elderly lady's lips trembled in anger, and she couldn't help but shout, "Third uncle, old village chief, you don't know anything. Do you know what this child did 2 days ago?" She ran to Long Gate Inn alone and violently beat up Miss Lu from Tiandao's sect. Tiandao's sect came to make trouble for me, and I had to deal with them for several days. I didn't know how many things they gave me before I finally dealt with the matter. After sending away that great Buddha from Tiandao's sect with great difficulty, I finally took the time to come over today. I didn't even have time to teach this child who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth a lesson before you two came over. Grandmother, you clearly came today for younger sister's matter, so why are you implicating me now? Although Wu Yanjun, that middleman, has gone missing, didn't you directly find that family and negotiate this transaction? You're talking nonsense, Wang Shi said guiltily. How could Arbor not know this expression? She was just trying to trick her, but she didn't expect the old lady to be so gullible and give herself away. Grandmother, Shaolin, also calls you grandmother. How could you sell your sister for such a small amount of money? Could it be that when you dream in the middle of the night, there aren't any malicious ghosts crawling up from the ground to walk to your bed and drag you back to the 9 hells purgatory to be punished? Qiao Mu's chilly words were filled with boundless ghostly energy. Wang Shi was so scared that her body trembled. How could Wei Ziqi not understand? She rushed forward and picked up Qiao Lin, who was being held by Su Jiao. She looked at Madame Wang and the others with a guarded expression and said angrily, "Mother, although our family is poor, we're far from selling our daughter. Mother, you'd better put away these thoughts and never talk about sending Lin away in front of me again." Okay. All of you are rebelling against me. Madame Wang was so angry that she beat her chest and stamped her feet. She had a bitter look on her face. I'm just being considerate. The child in your belly is about to come out. When the time comes, how are you going to raise 3 children at home? Now, the burden is so heavy with only 2, this. Shut up. Great-grandfather 3 shouted. Chapter 73. Old fifth daughter-in-law, you. Third great-grandfather pointed at Madame Ne Wang and sighed. Muddle-headed. Many villagers were crowding outside the courtyard, and they were all pointing and whispering. Madame Ne Wang only felt that their gazes were filled with disdain, and she felt a stabbing pain in her heart that made it difficult for her to breathe. Third great-grandfather, mother-in-law is doing this for the good of eldest brother's family. Shut up. Third great-grandfather roared at Su Jiao. Do you think I'm an old fool? Zhongheng daughter-in-law, it's enough for you to manage your family's affairs. Aren't you ugly and shameful if you insist on sticking your hand into Zhongbang's family? Su Jiao instantly quieted down and didn't dare to make a sound. Old fifth daughter-in-law, you don't need to bother with Zhongbang's family's affairs in the future. Although our bloodline has fallen to Quoto village, it's not to the extent that we can't raise a child. It's just a matter of having more food. Zhongbang daughter-in-law, don't worry, as long as third granduncle is here, your family's children won't starve. Don't worry about giving birth, and don't be too burdened. Third uncle. Madame Ne Wang was so angry that she almost fainted. Old fifth daughter-in-law, I want to discuss something with you. From what I see, the 3 brothers Zhongbang, Zhongxing, and Zhongheng all have their own families and children. Ah, your youngest daughter is also getting married in September. How about this, I'll make a decision for you. Let's split up the family here today. We can't split. Madame Ne Wang shrieked and collapsed onto the ground. Third uncle, although you're my elder, you can't bully us orphans and widows so brazenly. How can this family be split up just because you say so? If we don't split, look at what you've become. Third great-grandfather glanced indifferently at Madame Ne Wang, and a trace of disgust flashed through his sharp eyes. It's settled then. It's good that old village chief is here, so he can be a witness. Split now, split immediately. Third granduncle, old village chief, how about we wait for second brother to return to discuss this matter? Qiao Zhongbang saw his mother collapse on the ground, and his heart ached as he stepped forward, wanting to speak up for her. Zhongbang, I know you're filial and honest, but sometimes, you have to take care of your wife and children. Ziqin hasn't had it easy all these years. Great-grandfather 3 gave Qiao Zhongbang a meaningful glance, pulled him aside and whispered a few words. After Qiao Zhongbang came back with third granduncle, he didn't say anything. He just kept sneaking glances at Wei Ziqin, who had a cold expression on her face. The separation of the family went quite smoothly. The old lady's wails and howls were of no use. With the old village chief as a witness, great-grandfather 3 single-handedly facilitated the separation ceremony. He even took out the document and remembered it clearly. Arbor curled the corners of his mouth. His sharp gaze swept past the old village chief and third great-grandfather. When he turned around, his eyes couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. She returned to her small room and closed the door. She sat at the table for a long time before pouring herself a cup of cold tea. She muttered to herself, power is really a good thing. When I have power in my hands, I can have everything. Less than an hour ago. Great-grandfather 3 in the old village chief knelt in front of Crown Prince Lian, trembling with fear. They looked at the youth in front of them, who was holding a coarse teacup in one hand, as if he was holding a flawless moon. They held their breaths and didn't dare to make a sound. After a full 7 minutes, the youth's cold voice said faintly, by today, separate Jojo's family. In the future, if that old lady is blind enough to cause trouble for Jojo, I will cause trouble for you. Whoosh! An iron arrow swept past the 2 old men's hair and pierced into the pillar below the eaves. The pillar immediately tilted, almost unable to support half the eaves. I wonder if the 18 people in your 2 families are enough for me to cause trouble 3 times. The crown prince flicked his sleeves and stood up. The 2 old men immediately prostrated themselves on the ground. As your highness commands. Chapter 74. Old Lady Qiao was furious this time. She had lost all face in front of the entire village. After she was carried back, she fell ill on her bed and groaned. Qiao Mu flipped through the family division document beside her, a faint smile on her lips. After she hid the document, she took out the gold-beaded talisman pen she had snatched from her apparition. She spread out the 30 talisman papers that Brother Xiao Hu had bought for her in front of her. Taking a deep breath, she cleared her mind and concentrated. Arbor silently recited the elementary talisman technique incantation. She then made a hand seal according to what she had learned from the golden talisman jade tome and concentrated on drawing talismans. She had used up all the strength talismans and speed talismans on Hulun Mountain, so she needed to replenish some. Fortunately, she was now very familiar with drawing strength and speed talismans. In less than an hour, she had finished drawing 10 strength and speed talismans. What surprised her was that when she finished drawing the last strength and speed talisman, she clearly saw a faint blue halo on the talisman paper. Unlike the other 18 talismans that emitted a faint yellow light, these 2 talismans were covered in a layer of blue light. Qiao Mu naturally didn't know what was going on. She could only make a last-minute effort and release her mystic sense into her conscious to check the golden talisman jade tome. She watched as the second jade slip, which had originally shrunk into a ball, flew towards her and transformed into a thin golden book in front of her eyes. The book's pages were very wide, and every word in the book was the size of a fist. They jumped and floated in front of her eyes. Actually, when she opened the golden talisman jade tome for the first time, a large amount of information had already entered her mind. However, she felt that it would be faster to use her profound sense to flip through the golden talisman jade tome rather than blindly searching for information in her mind. After all, she didn't have a clue at the moment. It was very strenuous to search for information in her mind that she didn't know at all. At this moment, her apparition was squatting on the ground with the golden book in her arms. Arbor's mouth twitched as she glanced at her and used her mystic sense to quickly scan the contents of the second jade slip. According to the book, there were 4 types of talismans: ordinary yellow talismans, fine blue talismans, peerless purple talismans, and saint gold talismans. The strength talisman and speed talisman that she had just drawn with blue light were fine blue talismans. The quality of the blue talisman was much higher than the yellow talisman. The talisman power it contained was twice as much as the yellow talisman. The level of talisman power directly affected the duration of the talisman. As for the blue talisman, it was twice as long as the yellow talisman. In other words, a talisman that could only sustain one's combat strength for 5 minutes could now last at least 10 minutes. Beginner-level talismans may not have a requirement for quality. However, when it came to intermediate-level talismans, advanced-level talismans, and other high-quality talismans, the benefits of doubling the time enhancement could be seen in minutes. The funny thing was that the book also said that the path of a talisman master was filled with unimaginable hardships and dangers. Just to draw a high-quality blue talisman, one had to spend a lot of time, energy, and money. Talisman masters had to practice for at least 3 years before they could draw a few blue talismans. Therefore, for someone like her who had never drawn more than 100 talismans, to suddenly be able to draw a blue talisman was really a stroke of luck. What 3 years? She hadn't drawn one in 3 days. The strange thing was, she always felt that when she held the brush in her hand, there was an indescribable feeling of smoothness when drawing talismans. Even if she was a bit unfamiliar at the beginning, she found that familiar feeling after drawing 10 talismans. It was as if she had drawn thousands of talismans before. Just as her mystic sense was about to withdraw, the golden book turned into a jade slip and flew back to its original place with a whoosh. A few more talisman papers floated down from the air. Arbor withdrew from her conscious and fished out the new talisman papers to take a look. There were a few new demonstration-level elementary talismans. Chapter 75. Peace Talisman: seek good fortune, avoid calamities, and resolve difficulties. Beginner-level yellow talisman can ensure one day's safety. Calming Talisman: for 2 hours, one can quickly concentrate and calm down, achieving the goal of doubling the mystic energy from the outside world. Dizziness Talisman: dizziness for 5 minutes. Opponents 1 level higher than the user are immune to the effect. Immobilization Talisman: dizziness for 5 minutes. Opponents 1 level higher than the user are immune to the effect. Arbor squatted in front of the table and flipped through the talisman papers in his hand. When the descriptions of these talismans appeared in his conscious, a certain child rolled his eyes to express his disdain. Every single one of them was so fucking useless. What was the use of a peace talisman to ensure one day's safety? Wouldn't it return to its original state after 1 day? Besides, the elementary talisman power on these peace talismans definitely wasn't high. It was hard to say whether some great misfortune could be turned into good fortune. The calming talisman was even more useless. What could it do in 2 hours? Some people might not have finished communicating with the outside world after 2 hours of meditation and hadn't even captured their mystic energy. What was the use of doubling it? As for those dizziness talismans and immobilization talismans, little Jojo really didn't want to ridicule them. With her current cultivation, she could only immobilize small fries below the 3rd level of Mystic Cultivator level. It was useless against people 1 level higher than her, so what was the use? As for those ordinary people, did they even need techniques like immobilization and dizziness? They could just crush them with 1 finger. Useless. Useless. Little Xiao Mu threw away 1 talisman after another. She was so angry every time she threw one. In the end, the little person was paralyzed by the bed. Bored to death, she touched the last 2 yellow talismans and glanced at them without much hope. Wall traversing talisman, traversing walls within 3 feet for 5 minutes. Storage talisman, 1 cubic meter of storage space. Items can be stored and stored 100 times. Living things can't be stored. Little Xiao Mu's eyes lit up. She finally saw 2 slightly better talismans. How could she not draw at least 2 of the wall-traversing talismans that were essential to every household? Storage talismans were even more surprising. In her previous life, she had once seen an intermediate-level storage talisman in the hands of a young elite disciple from her family. That intermediate-level storage talisman could only store about 3 cubic meters of items, but in everyone's eyes, it was already a very magical item. In her previous life, the popularity of storage talismans was reflected in the fact that they could be sold for an astonishingly high price in both the black market and the normal market. Once the storage talisman appeared in the marketplace, there would be an uproar and many parties would fight over it. Xiao Qiao looked at the remaining 10 blank talisman papers in her hand and excitedly spread them out to continue drawing wall-passing talismans and storage talismans. In the beginning, she was extremely unfamiliar with it, but after failing 2 or 3 times, she started to become proficient. It was as if she was born to draw talismans. The smoothness of her strokes would surely shock any talisman master present to the point their eyeballs would fall to the ground. Which talisman master could draw talismans so smoothly and quickly after 2 or 3 times? In the end, out of the 10 blank talisman papers, she failed 3 times. She drew 3 elementary yellow wall-passing talismans and 3 elementary yellow storage talismans. The last talisman she drew was a blue elementary storage talisman. The talisman power of a blue talisman was double that of a yellow talisman. Therefore, her last elementary blue talisman had a storage space of 2 cubic meters, which could be stored and stored 200 times. It was a pity that she didn't have the money to buy more blank talisman papers. Otherwise, she might be able to draw a few more blue talismans. She always felt that high-quality blue talismans weren't as rare as the book said. The little fellow propped up her chin with one hand and happily put away all the talisman papers she had drawn. She stood up and looked at the dark sky outside the window. Her eyes rolled as a plan formed in her mind. Chapter 76. There were over 100 households in Kwoto village. Excluding Tycoon Zhou's family, the Qiao family courtyard that elderly lady lived in could be considered one of the wealthiest families in the village. Meanwhile, younger uncle Qiao Zhongheng and Su Jiao's house was located next to the Qiao family courtyard, and there was even a side door in the middle that connected the 2 houses. Elderly Lady Qiao doted on her youngest son quite dearly, and among her grandchildren, the one she favored the most was Su Jiao's son, little Fatty Qiao. When Arbor snuck to younger uncle's house window, he saw the 4-year-old chubby boy making a big fuss in the house. Su Jiao coaxed the child until she was badly battered, and her husband, Qiao Zhongheng, even scolded her in dissatisfaction. Su Jiao angrily threw the chubby boy onto the bed and turned to point at Qiao Zhongheng as she scolded, "Coax him if you can." She was almost angered to death today. She made a trip to eldest brother's house, but she didn't reap any benefits and was even scolded by that old-fashioned third granduncle. She was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. "I say, seriously, doesn't our son just want a clay figurine toy? Just buy it for him. How are we going to coax him when he's making such a fuss?" Qiao Zhongheng became angrier as he spoke. Buy, it doesn't cost money. That lousy toy costs half a tael of silver. If you're so eloquent, why don't you buy it for your son yourself?" Su Jiao's temper flared up at the mention of money. "It's not like you don't know that Shaolin's matter is a mess. The deposit we received from the Dou family has been refunded, and your mother even told me not to meddle in this matter in the future. Money, this requires money, that requires money. Why don't you give me 10 or 8 taels of silver to spend? Why are you being so loud? Xiao Zhongheng's face flushed red from his wife's words. He had always been an idle, drunken fool. No matter how many taels his mother gave him, it wasn't enough for him to squander in a few days. How could he have known that their family was short on money? I didn't know that Shaolin's matter was a mess. Didn't you say last time that we could earn 20 taels of silver after selling Shaolin? He was still thinking of swindling a few taels of silver from his wife to buy 2 bottles of good wine. Sell. Sell. Su Jiao was so angry that her head hurt. She glared at her husband and said, "Your niece is very capable. Do you know that you've slapped your mother's face in front of so many people today? Let me tell you, that niece of yours is really a debt collector." She was already so good at scheming at such a young age. He really didn't know how she could think of so many things at such a young age. He actually invited the old village chief and 3rd granduncle here to make the decision. With just a few words, they separated big brother and big sister-in-law's family. What? Xiao Zhongheng raised his voice. Eldest brother's family moved out. Drink, drink, drink. You only know how to drink all day. What else can you know? I think other than you, this news has spread throughout the entire family. Who doesn't know that big brother and sister-in-law's family moved out today? Su Jiao angrily pushed Xiao Zhongheng away and angrily pinched the handkerchief in her hand. Then 20 taels are gone just like that? Xiao Zhongheng exclaimed with a pained expression. 20 taels. Bah! 20 taels. We don't even have any money left. Su Jiao wished for nothing more than to spit at him. Why did she marry such a good-for-nothing? She was so angry that her heart ached, and she directly fell asleep on the bed after pulling the blankets over her. Xiao Zhongheng shouted at his son and blew out the lamp before going to bed as well. He hugged Su Jiao with a drooling face and asked, "Wife, are we just going to let our 20 taels go like this? I know that you have big ideas and are smarter than me. You should think of something." Chapter 77. How could Su Jiao be resigned to this? She was also trying to think of an idea with her insides burning. Although Xiao Zhongheng was a good-for-nothing, as long as he wanted to, his ability to smear honey with his mouth was top-notch. He could soften Su Jiao with just a few words. After the two fooled around like this for a while, Xiao Zhongheng fell into a deep sleep, but Su Jiao tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep as she thought about those 20 taels of silver. Arbor, who had been hiding under the eaves and eavesdropping for a long time, had long been so angry that his fists were tightly clenched. Her guess was right. Su Jiao really did play tricks on Shaolin. No wonder she had been so enthusiastic and diligent in coming to their house to persuade their mother to send Shaolin away as soon as possible. It turned out that she could still fish out 20 taels of silver as a reward. 20 taels. Her pitiful younger sister's life was only worth 20 taels in Su Jiao's eyes. If she hadn't added fuel to the fire in her previous life, Shaolin wouldn't have been taken away by Wu Yanjun so smoothly. This damn woman. Arbor took out a wall-passing talisman from his pocket and tore it open, a cold glint flickering in the depths of his black eyes. Su Jiao rolled over on the bed again and lamented to the wall. She couldn't think of any good ideas after thinking for most of the night, so she was truly at her wit's end. But she really couldn't bear to give up those 20 taels of silver just like that. It was all that damn child Arbor's fault. If he hadn't interfered, eldest sister-in-law would have long handed Shaolin over and there wouldn't have been so much trouble in the aftermath. Su Jiao rolled over again and opened her eyes with a dry mouth. Just as she was about to pour a cup of water from the table, she suddenly saw a shadow float past her eyes. She instantly quivered in fright, and all her drowsiness disappeared without a trace. She sat upright like a spring and shouted in fright, "Who's there?" Xiao Zhongheng, who was sleeping soundly, groaned like a dead pig. Su Jiao saw nothing in front of her and calmed herself down before inwardly sighing in relief. She only knew that she was too nervous after sleeping in the middle of the night. She didn't want to drink any more water, so she lay down and turned over. Then, her eyes suddenly widened, as if they were about to split open. Looking at the half-drooping face in front of him, his heart almost jumped out of his chest. Her brain was dead for 3 seconds before she finally realized what was happening in front of her. She let out a shrill scream, scaring Qiao Zhongheng into sitting up in his sleep. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Qiao Zhongheng glared at Su Jiao and said angrily, "Why are you screaming in the middle of the night?" Su Jiao pointed at the back of Qiao Zhongheng's head. Her lips were trembling, and her eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. She stared fixedly at the ghastly pale face on the wall as it retracted back into the wall bit by bit before disappearing. Qiao Zhongheng looked back. There was nothing but a wall. Face. Su Jiao shuddered, her entire body trembling. What face? Qiao Zhongheng, who hadn't seen anything at all, was baffled. Ghost. Su Jiao's eyes rolled back, and she fell down stiffly. Arbor wiped away the dust smeared on her face and turned to look at the brightly lit Qiao Zhongheng's house. The corner of her mouth hooked up coldly. "You're scared already? The good days are still waiting for you guys." As the shadows of the trees swayed, the little girl's figure quickly disappeared from the dark house. There was only a faint breeze that blew by and scattered the leaves on the ground. Early the next morning, Arbor was woken up by the sound of goods being unloaded outside. Her spirits were roused, and she jumped up. She carelessly wiped her face and ran outside. She bumped into Wei Ziqin, who asked curiously, "Jojo, there's a group of people outside saying they're here to deliver goods to you." Chapter 78. "Mother, I'll be right back." Arbor excitedly ran past Wei Ziqin. Wei Ziqin turned her head to look, a trace of a smile on her face. "How long has it been since I've seen my daughter so happy? Now she looks like a lively child." As soon as Arbor ran out the door, she saw a dozen carriages parked in front of her yard. Many workers were moving boxes from the carriages and temporarily piling them up next to the yard door. A youth in tight-fitting black clothes walked up to Qiao Mu and respectfully bowed, asking, "Little master, can we move all the chests inside?" "Yes, move them to the woodshed." Arbor glanced at the youth and waved her hand vigorously. The villagers were all attracted by the commotion at Arbor's house, and they all surrounded the carriages to admire the tightly covered boxes. "Qiao, did you spend all the gold the Heavenly Tao sect gave you to buy so many things?" The neighbor's auntie curiously looked at the items in front of Qiao Mu's courtyard. If so many boxes were moved inside, wouldn't the Qiao family's yard be filled? Arbor nodded and pulled Xiao Hu out to help direct the movement of the boxes. She followed the youth in black into the house and had them move all the boxes to the woodshed. The number of boxes exceeded Arbor's expectations. She blinked and looked at the youth in black with some confusion. "There are 3,000 iron arrows here, each one made of fine iron. There are 30 boxes, and each box has 100 iron arrows." The black-clothed youth opened one of the chests next to Qiao Mu and showed her the shiny, jet-black iron arrows inside the chest. Afterwards, he took out a small silver gold-plated chest and handed it to Qiao Mu. "Little master, keep this well. There are 10 crow gold arrows inside. After you bind them with your blood, you can retrieve them every time you shoot them out. This item is hard to come by, so you must keep it well." Arbor looked at the youth with sparkling eyes. "Why?" The 900 taels of gold she gave couldn't even buy half a strand of hair, let alone a single arrow. No matter how ignorant she was, she knew that black gold was a top-grade material specially used to make mystic weapons. It was very spiritual, and even an entire magnetite mine might not be able to dig out a small piece of black gold. This was a priceless item, and that nouveau riche crown prince gave her 10 black gold arrows in one go. Why did she feel like she was hugging a very thick thigh? The youth in black smiled. Young master, don't worry, these are all free. Arbor rolled her eyes in annoyance. If you dare to take money, I'll immediately kick you from one door to the other. The youth in black suddenly felt that his perception was very good. He actually saw a trace of viciousness in the little girl's eyes. Ha ha. He quickly closed the box and handed another one to Miss Arbor. This is the crow repeating crossbow. It's also a level 12 mystic weapon made of black gold. His Highness said that it's the same as the ferrule he gave young master. Currently, its level has been suppressed to around level 3. Young master will be able to use it as soon as you start. Arbor flipped through the 30 normal repeating crossbows and put them away together with the crow repeating crossbow. Then she turned to look at the boxes of clothes that were carried in. According to their previous agreement, a certain crown prince would buy her 20 years' worth of clothes to wear. Arbor rubbed her little nose. Cough cough, 20 years seemed a bit long. At that time, she really did have the intention of making things difficult for him. Chapter 79. Seeing that the crown prince had handled this matter so well, Xiao Mu looked at the youth in black with a rare amiable expression. So you're called Yu Xiu. Go back and thank His Highness on my behalf. Alright, you can leave after putting the things down. Look, look. This heartless little thing said this. No wonder His Highness had warned him to be careful of this little fellow. She would turn her back on him as soon as the things were in her hands. The youth in black straightened his face and cupped his hands at Xiao Mu. Little master, His Highness has instructed me to follow you from now on and work for you. Also, I'm not called Yu Xiu. I'm called Ao Yi. Miss, Yu Xiu is the captain of the Dragon Saliva Guard. Just how blind are your eyes? Yu Xiu has always been by His Highness' side. Logically speaking, this isn't the first time you've seen him. How could you mistake him for someone else? Shouldn't you reflect on your actions? Ao Yi. Xiao Mu looked at the handsome youth in black curiously and asked in a small voice, is it because you often stay up late that your crown prince gave you such an unreliable name? Ao Yi, ha. Miss, you guessed wrong. That's not the case. I'm a member of the Night Pavilion. Every member of the Night Pavilion has the word Yi in their name. Oh. Xiao Mu turned her face away with disinterest. She wasn't interested in asking him what the Night Pavilion was. It was probably the power of that nouveau riche crown prince. Do you know how to drive a carriage? Ao Yi. Why does it feel like I'm following Miss for the rest of my life? There was a commotion outside the courtyard. Arbor frowned. Stay here and look after the things. I'll go out and see what's going on. Yes. Ao Yi cupped his hands. Xiao Mu walked out of the door with her small paws behind her back with a solemn expression. She saw a familiar-looking red-clothed young girl around 12 to 13 years old nimbly rummaging through several wooden chests while continuously clicking her tongue in amazement. Mother, look at this satin. It's so soft and comfortable to the touch. I've never seen such high-quality material. It's enough to make me 2 dresses and several handkerchiefs. Yes, yes. If our Ying Chun were to wear this set of satin, she would definitely surpass Tian Xian, Ha ha ha. A woman in her 30s or 40s popped out from the side and picked up the silver-threaded satin in Xiao Yingchuan's hands. She giggled and continuously gestured to her daughter's body. Heavens, did Xiao Zhongbang's family become rich? There were so many carriages of silk and satin that her eyes were dazzled. It would be even better if she could carry all these back. The woman's face was full of smiles. The workers who were moving the boxes looked at the mother and daughter who were talking to themselves helplessly. They muttered, that's not it. Young miss, she. Ah, what's in this little box? Xiao Yingchuan's sharp eyes saw a young maidservant about 10 years old dressed in a small turquoise robe alighting from the carriage. Her gaze then landed on the rosewood box in the young maidservant's arms. Eh. The little girl jumped in fright. Seeing that Xiao Ying-chun was about to snatch it away, she hastily shielded it against her chest as if she was protecting her food. She tightly clutched the box and refused to let go as she shouted, "Why quickly let go? This isn't for you. This belongs to our young master. Hurry and let go. Let go. Let me see what it is." Xiao Yingchuan's eyes were practically glued to the box. Taking advantage of the fact that she was taller than the maidservant, she went forward and snatched the box from the little girl's hands. Chapter 80. The box full of jewelry was eye-catching, and Xiao Yingchuan's eyeballs nearly popped out of their sockets. How could she be willing to let go of the box? She had never seen so many beautiful jewelry in her entire life. What golden-laid purple jade pendant, what glazed agate necklace. At first glance, there were more than a dozen types of bracelets and bracelets. Among them, the pure gold silk bracelet was already the most unremarkable. The various beautiful reds and emeralds dazzled her eyes. She hugged the box and pounced to her mother, Madame Ney Li's side, acting coquettishly. Mom, look at these. They're so pretty. Oh my. The madam slapped her thigh and exclaimed, "These are all good stuff. Chun, you have to put them away properly. Don't lose them." The madam spoke as if these were all her daughter's possessions, which made the tearful young maidservant widen her eyes in shock. Heavens! The young maidservant swore that she had never seen such a bandit and shameless person. Mom, I won't lose them. Xiao Ying-chun hugged the box tightly to her chest in glee, and her eyes kept darting left and right. She arrogantly pulled over a dozen boxes and said to the stupefied workers beside the carriage, these, and these. Load them all onto the carriage and move them away." As she spoke, she went up with a grin and continued to touch the satin that she had previously felt especially comfortable. She turned around to ask her mother, "Mom, don't you think it's strange that the Chiao family's elderly lady in the third branch's youngest aunt didn't come over after such a big commotion?" This was a bit illogical. If that elderly lady and the third branch's youngest aunt came to snatch the goods first, how could the two of them have a share? Madame Ney Li also found it strange. That old fart and the third branch's Su Jiao weren't easy to deal with. They were people who would curry favor wherever there were benefits, so how could they not come? If they had known beforehand that the eldest branch had bought so much good material home, how could they not come to snatch it? Madame Ney Li hugged a roll of brightly colored material and couldn't close her mouth from smiling as she touched it. "Why do you care so much about them? We came first and picked first. Who told them to come so slowly? Who's to blame for being short-handed?" Xiao Ying-chun hugged the rosewood jewelry box, unable to put it down. She beamed with joy as she nodded repeatedly. She pointed at the dumbstruck workers on the side. "Mom, then let's go quickly. All of you, and all of you, what are you all standing there for? Hurry up and put your things in the car and follow us." Hee hee. Arbor didn't expect to see such a wonderful show as soon as he came out. This was really an eye-opener. With a sidestep, the petite figure arrived in front of Xiao Ying-chun and ruthlessly kicked Xiao Yingchuan's knee. As she cried out in pain, she jumped up and knelt on the ground. When the box flew out of her hands, Xiao Qiao caught the jewelry box with one hand and sat on one of the boxes. Bang! The lid of the box was pressed down, almost breaking Madame Li's fingers as she hastily retracted them. "Damned girl! What are you doing?" Madame Li cursed with her hands on her hips. These, and these are all mine. Where do you want to take it?" Arbor looked at the two people with disdain and waited on them coldly. "Not only is your face big enough, but your appetite is also incredibly big. There are so many carts of my things, and you want to take them away without even saying a word? I really want to ask the two of you, who gave you such big face and guts?" Madame Ney Li's face flushed red, and her chest heaved up and down in anger. She pointed at Arbor and angrily reprimanded, Why you little girl, do you know who you're talking to?" Chapter 81. What's your surname? Little Xiao crossed her legs, and her gaze turned even colder as she stared at the woman. These people were truly interesting. They didn't look like fools, so how could they not know how to conduct themselves? There were so many boxes displayed in front of her house that it would make people green with envy, but wasn't it a little too unsightly to directly rob them? Even robbers didn't need to be so arrogant, right? Moreover, who told them that things in Arbor's hands could be so easily snatched? Previously, there were so many vicious people who wanted to snatch the heart of paradise from her, but not a single one of them managed to get away with it. Yet this pair of mother and daughter, who were so weak that they couldn't even truss up a chicken, wanted to learn from others and snatch things. They should take a pail of water and look in the mirror to see if they were so shameless. Madame Neili looked at Arbor in embarrassment. She didn't expect that this child really didn't recognize her. You, child, your words are too unpleasant. According to seniority in the clan, I'm your second aunt. As she said this, she forced a smile on her face and pulled over Xiao Ying-chun, who was groaning and standing up angrily. She coughed dryly and said, "This is your older sister Ying-chun. Haven't you seen each other since you were young? Perhaps you were too young back then and forgot. We're all relatives of your family. Where's your father and mother? Have them come out for a while." There were so many silks, fabrics, and jewelry. No matter what, a portion should be given to the mother and daughter, right? They were all relatives of the same family, and they were such close villagers. It wouldn't be right if they didn't share some with the mother and daughter, right? As Madame Neili thought this, she put on a fake smile and retracted the anger on her face. She then gently pinched her daughter's palm, telling her to restrain her anger as well. But how could Xiao Ying-chun restrain her anger? She had never suffered such grievances in her life. She was kicked to the ground by Arbor, and her posture was so ugly that she almost didn't want to recall it. With so many villagers watching her make a fool of herself, how could she calm down the anger in her heart? Mom! Xiao Ying-chun tugged at her mother's elbow and glared at Arbor angrily. Why are you being so polite to her? Take the things away. There's no need to waste words with her. Arbor chuckled and glanced at the dumbstruck workers. What are you waiting for? Why aren't you carrying the box into the courtyard? Are you waiting to be robbed? Yes. The leading waiter waved his hand. Move it. A group of people came forward to unload the goods, moving the boxes of fine satin to Arbor's courtyard. Xiao Ying-chun's eyes were about to shoot out a venomous glint. Who knew where she got the courage from, but she actually rushed up and hugged the chest in one of the shop assistant's hands, fighting back and forth with him. Let go, let go. Where are you taking my clothes? Let go of me. The clerk looked embarrassed and looked in the direction of Arbor for help. Young Mississippi, why are you being so polite to bandits? Arbor smirked and waved his hand. Just beat them out of here. Yes. With Arbor's words, the shop assistants no longer hesitated. When they saw Madame Neili and her daughter rushing up to grab the chest in a frenzy, they didn't hold back anymore. Madame Neili and her daughter were both ordinary people, so how could they win against the shop assistants with round waists and thick arms? Madame Neili's head bumped into a tree, and she shrieked as she touched the blood dripping from her forehead. Xiao Ying-chun fell to the ground in a sorry state. She clutched her leg and bawled loudly, "Want my life, want my life." Madame Neili also responded by wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf, "Miss Xiao killed someone, killed someone." Chapter 82. What are you waiting for? Continue to move. Don't take these people's cries seriously. Arbor indifferently swept a glance at the workers, then his disdainful gaze swept past the crying mother and daughter pair sitting on the ground. When Madame Li saw the surrounding villagers pointing at them and laughing at them, she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. She got up from the ground and pounced toward Arbor's courtyard like a hungry tiger. Stop her! Arbor sternly shouted. The two workers guarding the courtyard's entrance raised their arms and blocked Madame Li's path. Madame Li pushed their arms and scratched and kicked them. Qiao Zhongbang, Wei Ziqin, come out. I want the old madam to be the judge of this. We're all relatives, so is there a need to take things to such extremes? Wei Ziqin ran out when she heard the commotion at the courtyard's entrance. No matter how much she wanted to ignore it, she couldn't completely pretend to be deaf and mute. Wei Ziqin couldn't help but nervously wipe her hands when she saw Madame Li acting like a lunatic. She looked up at her daughter. Xiao Mu returned her a reassuring gaze before saying faintly, Mom, don't mind them. I, your daughter, bought these things with real gold and silver. I earned them by risking my life to guide you through Hulun Mountain. Wei Ziqin panicked at the mention of Hulun Mountain. She recalled how her daughter had led the Tiandao sect's people up the mountain that day and how she had been on tenterhooks waiting at the foot of the mountain. Her heart couldn't help but tighten. She nodded and said, Mother knows. She turned to face the two workers blocking the way and said to Madame Li, second sister-in-law, our family's Jojo risked his life to buy these goods. As parents, we can't ask our daughter to take these things. In other words, outsiders shouldn't even think about it. Madame Li was so angry that her eyes turned red. She shouted, How can you say that? What are you talking about? Look at how your courtyard can barely fit these boxes. What's wrong with sharing a few with us? We are all relatives of the clan. Do you really have to be so ridiculous as to disown your own family? Second sister-in-law, these are all things that Jojo exchanged for with his life. She has the right to use them. Wei Ziqin said with a serious face, second sister-in-law's family has always been well off. They don't have to worry about food and clothing. I don't think they would extend their hands so far to my daughter. This Madame Li usually flaunted her family's wealth and happiness in front of the villagers. Who would have thought that she would actually do such a shameless act of robbery today? Many of the villagers who saw this secretly laughed in their hearts. Madame Li's lips trembled as she watched the boxes being carried away in front of her eyes. Her heart felt like it was about to bleed. It was true that her family was wealthy, but she had never been so extravagant and wasteful. She bought hundreds of boxes of clothes and satin. As for those expensive jewelry, she didn't even want to think about it. It was already good enough that she could add a few silver jewelry every year. Madame Li was so angry that she felt dizzy. Xiao Yingchun stared at Arbor's back and screeched, Jewelry box, my jewelry box. Arbor ignored the two of them and directly carried the rosewood box into the courtyard. Accompanying him was a little servant girl who followed suit. She couldn't be bothered to waste her breath with these two idiots. She didn't really like the jewelry the nouveau riche crown prince gave her, and she didn't have the hobby of wearing it on her head like a peddler. However, this didn't mean that she, Arbor, would allow others to take advantage of her Arbor's things. Especially those idiots, it was even more impossible. Chapter 83. Madame Nelly didn't have a good time in Arbor, so she angrily dragged her wailing daughter and rushed towards Su Jiao's house in a spurt of energy. She didn't believe that Su Jiao wouldn't be envious and covetous when she found out that there were so many good things in Arbor's house. At that time, with Su Jiao leading the way, the mother and daughter pair following behind, they would definitely be able to snatch some good things back. However, if that box of jewelry fell into Su Jiao's hands, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't be able to get some back. The more Madame Nelly thought about it, the more pain she felt. However, she couldn't hold back the anger in her heart and went straight to Su Jiao's house. As soon as she entered the courtyard and called out, Big Sister Su Jiao, a basin of dog blood splashed onto her head. Madame Nelly was immediately dumbstruck. The delicate Miss Qiao Yingchuan's cheeks were also stained with 2 drops of dog blood, and she immediately shrieked as if she had been stained with some corrosive liquid. She covered her face with one hand and continuously smeared the blood, her eyes revealing a terrified expression. Madame Nelly was also shocked. When she focused her eyes, she saw an incense burner table in the courtyard, and 3 fist-thick incense candles were lit in broad daylight. A middle-aged Taoist priest was waving his peachwood sword in front of the table and jumping up and down while reciting with conviction, "Immortal venerables and heavenly monarchs command the world, demons and ghosts should quickly disperse." Roar. Ha! Madame Neili, what kind of situation was this? Su Jiao was curled up behind the incense burner table wrapped in a blanket on a hot day. She looked over with a pale face, her eyes unfocused. She then saw that there were several dozen yellow talismans pasted on her blanket. Her hands, feet, and even her forehead were covered in talismans. She looked extremely strange, as if she was possessed. When Madame Neili saw that the situation wasn't good, she immediately grabbed her daughter's hand and hastily escaped from the courtyard without even greeting Qiao Zhongheng. She then walked toward the elderly lady's house next door. Unlucky. Who knew if the demonic aura on Su Jiao's body would spread to them? For safety's sake, they should stay as far away as possible. No wonder Su Jiao didn't go to Arbor's house to snatch things today. It turned out she was possessed and couldn't go out. However, elderly lady was also strange today. Su Jiao's home was connected to elderly lady's home, so it was impossible for elderly lady not to hear any commotion when Su Jiao had already caused such a ruckus. Madame Li held her daughter's hand and, with a head full of dog blood, chatted with the gatekeeper for a long time before finally entering the matriarch's home. Madame Li inquired about the matriarch's condition and found out that the matriarch had been sick since last night. Madame Neili came to a sudden realization. She was wondering why elder Lady Qiao, with her mean and greedy personality, wouldn't not act upon hearing the news. So it turned out that she was as unlucky as Su Jiao. One was possessed while the other fell ill. Madame Li pulled her daughter to the matriarch's room. She didn't even wait for the old maidservant to finish announcing her arrival. Madame Li howled, "Io, my old lady," and rushed into the room. Madame Li lay in front of the matriarch's bed and howled loudly, but she didn't shed a single tear. The old lady was so angry that she felt dizzy on the spot. "I'm not dead yet, so what are you howling for?" Madame Li's howling caused the originally sickly matriarch to feel uncomfortable all over. She angrily reprimanded, "Shut up. What exactly happened?" Madame Li embellished the story of how the Arbor family moved the chests and baskets. As she spoke, she paid attention to the matriarch's expression. However, she saw that the matriarch's expression was very calm, as if she didn't care about those goods at all. The sky was really going to rain red soon. Elder lady was actually so strange today. Shouldn't she have jumped up on the spot and gone to Arbor's house to snatch the goods? How could elder Lady Qiao be calm? She was so angry that she almost fainted. However, the Arbor family had separated last night, so no matter how much she wanted to extend her hand, she couldn't reach out to her granddaughter who had separated from them. After hearing Madame Li's instigation, elder Lady Qiao suppressed her belly full of anger. She frowned and persuaded Madame Li with a few words before impatiently sending Madame Li back to wash off the dog blood on her body. The smell of dog blood almost made her vomit. When Madame Li saw that the matriarch had actually given up on such a large amount of property, she immediately felt that it was a bit inconceivable. When she was sent out by the matriarch, Madame Li kept muttering about strange things. Thinking about how she had been running around for so long and hadn't received a single benefit, Madame Li's heart was filled with anger. She saw a hollow green stone vase standing by the matriarch's door and reached out to hold it in her arms. The matriarch, who was sending her off, was dumbstruck. Madame Li held the vase and muttered, "Old madam, then I'll be leaving first. Take care of yourself." She pulled her dissatisfied daughter and walked out of elder Lady Qiao's courtyard. The matriarch turned around and told elder Lady Qiao. The matriarch was so angry that she smashed a cup on the spot. This long-lived woman really didn't let go of any opportunity to pluck feathers from a goose. She didn't even let go of the vase at the door. Chapter 84. Disregarding how Madame Neili was running around, Xiao Mu happily ordered people to move the items into the courtyard, neatly piling them up one by one according to category. There's nothing for you to do here. Arbor's eyes lit up as she scanned the hundreds of boxes. She turned and waved at Aoyi like she was shooing away flies. Go back. Little master, this subordinate has already reported to you. From today onwards, this subordinate will follow little master closely. Xiao Mu grumpily rolled her eyes at him and waved her small hand in front of his face. Why would I want you to follow me closely? It's a waste of food and I have to get you a room to stay in. You can see for yourself that our yard is so small. We can't fit you. It would take a lot of effort, and she would have to waste her breath if there were people by her side at all times. Look, just like now. Originally, she had sent these people away and could already count the resources on her own. Now that they were here, how was she going to take out the heart of paradise to open the mystic realm? She was so angry. She didn't want to talk at all. The little fellow glared at Aoyi like a tiger eyeing its prey. She gestured with her chin toward the door, implying that he should get lost. Aoyi's mouth twitched. He quickly took out a purse embroidered with gold thread and presented it to her with both hands. This is my room and board for the next 3 years. Don't worry, little master. I don't need a room to stay in. I can stay anywhere in the yard. A bowl of rice is enough. Xiao Mu naturally confiscated Aoyi's money pouch and opened it to take a look. There were many small gold pellets and round, shiny little gold beans. Other than that, there were also many colorful gemstones. Adding them all together, there were at least 10,000 taels of silver. Not to mention 3 years, it was probably enough to cover 30 years of expenses. Arbor glanced at Aoyi and sized him up. She nodded and waved her hand again. Aoyi immediately understood and cupped his hands. Don't worry, little master. I'll be nearby. If little master needs anything, just call me. After saying this, he leaped up the eaves with a whoosh, and soon disappeared. Xiao Hu, who was standing at the entrance of the yard and blocked by the boxes, was so shocked that his jaw dropped. Her eldest sister was too amazing. She actually had to pay for the food and lodging of a subordinate. This was too exaggerated. At this time, the servant girl, who had been following Arbor without making a sound, also ran forward. She took out a bag of golden pellets and golden beans from her bosom and presented it to Arbor with both hands. Young master, this servant's name is Xiao Yao. I know a thing or two about washing clothes, cooking, combing hair, and makeup. This servant can sleep in the front yard, the firewood shed, and the haystack. A bowl of white rice is enough for me. The corners of Arbor's mouth twitched. He opened his money pouch and took out 2 small gold ingots, handing them to the little girl. Go buy groceries. Tycoon Crown Prince really put in a lot of effort. He even prepared food and accommodation for the 2 of them. Arbor was speechless for a moment. Her subordinate was so considerate, how could she, as the master, endure it? He was too embarrassed to push her out. Xiao Qiao walked to the box with her little paws behind her back. She turned around and shouted at the empty courtyard, Aoyi, do you know how to drive a carriage? Yes. Little master. Aoyi's face was full of tears. Little master wanted him to be a carriage driver for the rest of his life. Brother Xiao Hu, help me guard the entrance. Don't let anyone in. I'll put all of these into my inner world. Arbor waved his little hand at Xiao Hu, who was standing at the entrance of the courtyard but couldn't enter. Xiao Hu immediately responded and turned to stand outside the courtyard, closing the door behind him. Chapter 85. Arbor immediately took a cursory look at the boxes and realized that the nouveau riche crown prince was indeed quite reliable. There were more than 10 boxes of ready-made clothes for all 4 seasons, shoes, and hats, enough for their family to wear for a while. Other than that, there were 70 to 80 boxes of high-quality materials, thick, thin, silk, and velvet. There was really everything that one could think of. Coupled with more than 10 boxes of silk threads of various colors, even if mother wanted to cut and make clothes herself, she wouldn't have to worry. It was indeed enough to wear for 20 years. Haha, she had only said it casually. She didn't expect that the Crown Prince would really take care of everything for her. Arbor sat on one of the boxes and used her mystic senses to sense the surroundings before taking the heart of paradise out of her mouth. She didn't want to say anything after fighting with the sapling. It was simply tiring. If it weren't for the fact that there were too many boxes here and they took up a lot of space, she would have hated that she couldn't use a storage talisman. That way, she wouldn't have to fight with that strange tree every time. After snatching the heart of paradise, Xiao Mu deliberately used her mystic conscience to sweep over the tree. However, she saw that it was drooping its branches and swaying pitifully, as if it was complaining about her tyrannical power. Ha ha! This heart of paradise was hers, all right. Damn it, it took so much effort to take it out every time. How could she endure it? How infuriating! Arbor injected a strand of mystic energy into the heart of paradise. The pearl leaped and released a strange light. A translucent valley instantly appeared in midair. With a thought, the dozens of boxes at her feet quickly entered the paradise and were neatly placed in the open space in front of the peach forest. Arbor tried to take out one of the boxes. She only needed a little mystic energy to quickly summon the box. This time, she was completely at ease. She quickly moved the remaining boxes into the paradise. The ready-made clothes, shoes, hats, and other materials were placed separately so that they could be used in the future. After that, Arbor threw 30 boxes of iron arrows, 10 crow gold arrows, crow repeating crossbows, and ordinary repeating crossbows into the paradise. She took out a few golden beans and placed them in her purse. The rest of the money, including the jewelry box, were all thrown into the paradise. Xiao Mu narrowed her eyes and looked at the translucent valley in midair. She saw that the empty space in front of the peach forest was almost completely filled with boxes. However, there was still a lot of empty space behind the lake and peach forest, so Arbor wasn't worried that there wouldn't be enough space. Now, she was just waiting for second uncle to bring back all the supplies. When that time came, everything that needed to be prepared. Xiao Mu's small face was expressionless, but she was clearly happy on the inside. With a wave of her small hand, she retrieved the heart of paradise. Just as she swallowed it, she felt a gust of cold air assault her from afar. A layer of goosebumps inexplicably appeared on our dear Xiao Mu's skin, causing her heart to clench and her entire body to rapidly tighten. Xiao Mu. You? What are you? Chow 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 ao chow chow. In less than a second, the courtyard door was kicked open. Brother Hu flew towards Arbor like a kite with a broken string. Startled, Arbor's eyes turned cold. He took a step forward and rushed towards Xiao Hu, who was flying towards him. He reached out to catch him, but he couldn't withstand the force of the impact. Holding on to Xiao Hu, he staggered back a few steps. She touched Brother Hu's chest with her small hand and found that he had fainted. A ferocious old face suddenly appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. He only had one eye and half a nose. Half of his face was charred black, as if he had been burned by something. The upper half of his face was completely glued together, making him look rather terrifying. Chapter 86. Alarmed, Arbor immediately turned around and hastily took out ointment and smeared it on Xiao Hu's chest. That hemostatic ointment was extremely effective. The moment it was smeared, the blood immediately stopped flowing. Arbor's heart calmed down a bit. Just as she placed Xiao Hu against the wall of the courtyard, a sinister granny's face abruptly appeared in front of her, and a withered, twig-like hand reached for her neck. Xiao Mu dodged backwards, and a faint doubt flitted through the old woman's eyes. Her hand that was grabbing Xiao Mu also paused, and she examined Xiao Mu from head to toe before chuckling coldly. Little child, you're actually a mystic cultivator. Although your cultivation isn't high, it's commendable at your age. Old senior, may I ask why you suddenly barged into my home and injured my older brother? This granny carried dense mystic energy, and her cultivation was probably on par with that ghost saber that Prince Mo had crushed to death. Perhaps she was also a level 8 mystic cultivator. Although Arbor was alarmed, she didn't show it on the surface. This granny must have sensed the aura of the Heart of Paradise and followed it here. Arbor tightly clenched her fists, inwardly resentful. She was still too careless. Child, where are your parents? Father left early in the morning and still hasn't returned. Mother took the girl out to buy groceries. A trace of suspicion flashed through the granny's eyes. In reality, when she entered this courtyard, she had already used her mystic conscience to sense it. She knew that the little doll wasn't lying and that there was no one else's aura in this small residence. Little doll, tell Granny honestly, did anyone pass by your home just now? Or, did you see anything strange? Arbor honestly shook her head. The granny's gaze swept over her before she suddenly reached out and sucked the unconscious Xiao Hu into her palm. She was extremely fast, and Arbor couldn't stop her in time. Moreover, the difference in their cultivation was too great, so it was useless even if she wanted to stop her. The old woman's withered fingers picked up a bit of ointment from Xiao Hu's chest and brought it to her nose for a sniff. She then turned to Xiao Mu with a pensive smile. Little girl, how can a poor person afford to use such a high-quality ointment? I think you'd better confess honestly. When I passed by your house, I clearly smelled a trace of aura leaked out of the mystic domain after the mystic realm was refined. As expected, they're here for the Heart of Paradise. Arbor took a deep breath and clenched his fists tightly behind his back. If you don't tell me the truth, give me an explanation. The old woman gave her an enigmatic smile. This old woman will refine you two into puppet ghosts, making the two of you unable to reincarnate for all eternity. Arbor suddenly opened his small fists behind his back, and two strength and speed talismans shot out into the distance. At the same time, a cold voice that sounded like it had been pulled out from hell said mechanically and monotonously, "Kill her." Stay Up Late, who was flying over, never knew that he could be so fast. He only felt something bounce onto his body in a flash, and then a trace of special power and speed entered his blood vessels at the same time. There was no need for Arbor to give another order. Stay Up Late's 1 meter of grace flew in front of the old woman, startling her. She unconsciously retreated and let go of Xiao Hu's hand. Arbor reached out to grab Xiao Hu's body and lightly leaped to the side. She turned back to stare at the old woman as if she was looking at a corpse. That gaze made even the old woman, whose hands were stained with blood, shiver. She felt a chill run up her spine. Chapter 87. You're courting death. The old woman hated herself for being scared off by the little girl's gaze. She reached out and casually grabbed the sword with her withered fingers. He expected that under this grab, that unremarkable sword would definitely be shattered into pieces. But with a clang, the old woman's claws were knocked away. Before she could react, the young man's sword split into two. Under the old woman's shocked gaze, the sword in his left hand stabbed into the old woman's back. You! The old woman turned her head in shock. Her 10 withered fingers suddenly turned into sharp spikes and swiped them at the young man's arm. The 10 spikes were polished with a blue luster. It was obvious at a glance that they were highly toxic and could kill with just a touch. Arbor's pupils constricted as he watched from the side. A trace of doubt surfaced in his eyes. The spikes looked a bit like poisonous thorny vines. Could it be? So you're a demonic cultivator. A faint trace of disdain flitted through Ao Ye's eyes. It's just a pity that this poisonous thorny vine's level is a bit low. Everyone knew that a mystic cultivator above level 10 could find a powerful mystic beast to contract. When the time came, their combat strength would increase tremendously. But in reality, most people couldn't become mystic cultivators. A portion of them turned into body cultivators, which were ordinary martial artists. Their strength naturally couldn't be compared to mystic cultivators, but they had a huge advantage over ordinary people. An even smaller portion of people turned into demonic cultivators in pursuit of supreme strength at all costs. In the eyes of the world, demonic cultivators were definitely a terrifying dark profession. Unlike mystic cultivators who were open and aboveboard, demonic cultivators were often labeled as evil and dark. They absorbed the power of evil beasts and plants and fused it for their own use to increase their own strength. Their most common manifestation was that they fused part of the power of evil beasts and plants into their bodies. For example, the old woman's fingers could already mutate into poisonous thorny vines. This meant that her fusion was considered successful. Don't look at how the demonic cultivators were looked down upon right now. Once the zombie apocalypse happened, the survival advantages of this kind of people would quickly become apparent. In the later stages, when missions were exchanged for supplies, many special operations teams were born. At that time, the status of demonic masters in the teams was almost comparable to that of apothecaries. They were all indispensable and important members of the teams. He was a rare demonic cultivator, but there was no longer any need for him to exist. Kill her. Arbor was too lazy to investigate the old woman's identity and ordered again. Yes, little master. Roar. Stay Up Late suddenly released a giant beast with shiny black fur. It bit the old woman's arm, chewed twice, and spat out a pile of minced meat on the ground. It was a black panther the size of a small elephant. Its glossy fur flickered with a black light under the sun. When Yi released this giant beast, Xiao Mu's eyes suddenly lit up. This was the first time she had seen such an enormous mystic beast with such astonishing combat strength. A level 8 mystic cultivator tore off her arm in one bite, causing her to completely lose her ability to fight. This black panther was truly formidable. The nouveau riche crown prince was truly extravagant. He could casually send a subordinate over and instantly kill a level 8 mystic cultivator. With her cultivation, she couldn't see through Stay Up Late's level at all. However, she knew from the start that Stay Up Late's cultivation was definitely above the old woman's. Chapter 88. She knew from the start that Ye's cultivation was higher than the old woman's. So that the old woman was dead for sure. She wasn't using her power to bully others, but to protect herself. Every man for himself. She didn't want to die, so it was better for the old woman to die. The old woman had never thought that she would die in this small mountain village. Her single eye glared fiercely at the little girl who was walking towards her step by step. Little girl, if you kill me, you will never have a day of peace. My sect won't let you go. Your whole family will pay with their lives. You better think it through. After he finished speaking, he saw the little girl reveal a trace of ghostly sneer at him. What a load of nonsense. The black ferrule suddenly landed in her hand, and she smacked the old woman's face with it. The old woman's head was covered in blood, and her breathing became sluggish. Aoyi, don't you know that the first time we saw Little Master, she was killing people by the smelly ditch? Do you think such a savage little girl will listen to your threats? Ha! Crush her life lantern and kill her, Arbor said coldly. At this point, the old woman finally understood that the little child before her really wanted to take her life. How do you know about life lanterns? The old woman's lips trembled, and her entire body and soul trembled. Arbor wasn't interested in answering her. Instead, she stared at her with her dark eyes for a while, then asked softly, "What is a puppet ghost?" The old woman's body couldn't help but tremble. Even she didn't realize that she was trembling like a quail in front of this 6 or 7-year-old girl. I don't know what you're talking about. Little Master, this person should be an elder of the Ghoul sect. The Ghoul sect has an extremely secret technique called the puppet technique. They can refine young boys and girls into puppets. From then on, they'll be slaves and have no thoughts or emotions. They'll completely listen to their master's orders, like puppets on strings. Xiao Mu suddenly smiled at the old woman, but this smile only caused the old woman's entire body to tremble even more violently. She didn't know if it was a smile or not. The lines on the little girl's face didn't change, and her eyes were cold as if they contained ice shards. Only her little mouth moved as if it was opening, and her rigid little face was still paralyzed. Her smile was uncoordinated, and it gave people goosebumps. You want to refine me into a puppet? Xiao Mu suddenly moved. She shattered the old woman's chin with a kick and abruptly dashed up like she had gone mad. She ruthlessly smashed the ferrule on her body, as if she wanted to use her entire life's strength on this old woman. Trash like you who take other people's lives at the drop of a hat, what need do you have to live in this world? Dogs like you who don't care about other people's wishes and treat innocent people like kittens and puppies as puppets and slaves are the ones who should die first. Die. Arbor's emotions exploded. He fiercely wielded the black ferrule in his hand and smashed it on the old woman's face, body, and head. You're the kittens and puppies. You're the puppet slaves. You're the one. I'll let you refine me into a puppet. I'll let you treat me like a kitten or a dog. Go to hell, die, die. The little girl's eyes flashed with a fierceness that didn't match her age. She viciously smashed the ferrule on the back of the old woman's head, smashing it like a watermelon. Stay Up Late immediately rushed forward and grabbed the old woman's life lantern and crushed it. He saw the little girl holding the ferrule tightly with both hands. Her dark eyes were like whirlpools, so dark that no light could be seen. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.